The end of the world has arrived. My sister and I were fleeing for our lives when we encountered the Chinese army. My sister lied that I was infected, got on the plane alone, and left me among the zombie horde. I could only keep company with a group of adventurers. By a stroke of luck, I awakened my superpower. When I returned to the safe house in glory, my sister had already been infected and bit me before she died. Why do you have a better life than me, given a chance to live again? My sister didn't hesitate to choose to stay, hoping to awaken her superpower. At this moment, a prompt sound came from my mind. Host, welcome back. 1. Let my sister go. I'm willing to stay and wait for the next wave of rescue. When I heard these words, I suddenly realized that I had been reborn. Alyssa was desperately pushing me onto the rescue plane, and the urgency on her face was very sincere. She looked just like a sister who loved her elder sister deeply and understood the bigger picture. The rescue team members couldn't help but be moved by her. Others couldn't see through her, but I could see it clearly. There was still excitement on her face from being reborn, and the smile on her lips was not concealed at all. I pretended not to know anything, with tears in my eyes, and held her hand to give instructions. Alyssa, you must be careful when you're alone. Not only the zombie horde, but also that group of so-called adventurers. Alyssa impatiently pulled her hand away, with a hostile expression on her face, and whispered in a voice that only I could hear, Sister, this time, the one who awakens the superpower and is envied by others will be me. You can just be a coward in the safe house and finally be bitten to death by the zombies. Her face was full of resentment and viciousness, and she laughed heartily. I just found it ridiculous. Why did she think that I would follow in her footsteps? I was the one who fought my way out of the zombie horde. But I still pretended to be ignorant and looked at her with a confused expression. Alyssa, what are you talking about? When Alyssa saw me like this, she was even more convinced that she was the chosen one, the only one who had been reborn. She smiled and shook her head, but I clearly saw the arrogance in her eyes. Got it, sister, hurry up and get on the plane. I had no choice but to look reluctant, turning back every few steps as I followed the rescue team members onto the helicopter. On the way to the safe house, the sound of the helicopter's propellers was very loud. However, my thoughts were not interrupted. Looking down from the window of the cabin, the sight was full of devastation. Since the zombie virus began to spread, the entire human world has been occupied by the virus. At first, there were large-scale animal deaths in the suburbs, causing panic. People initially thought it was caused by the nuclear wastewater pollution of a certain country, but within a few days, some humans began to have their skin rot and move in a dull manner. Like stray dogs, they would always gang up on lone humans and attack them. After research, Chinese experts named this virus the zombie virus and warned residents not to go out. When Alyssa saw the news, she was eager to leave the city and didn't listen to my dissuasion at all. I didn't feel at ease letting her go out alone, so I had to accompany her. In my previous life, the SUV broke down halfway, and we happened to meet the Chinese army that came to the rescue. Alyssa lied that I was infected with the zombie virus, left me behind, and got on the plane alone. Half an hour later, a large number of zombie hordes suddenly appeared in the city. I fled desperately, using all my strength to wound the zombies, but in the end, I was cornered in an unfinished building. When I was isolated and helpless, filled with despair, I awakened my superpower, because I didn't have a good grasp of my superpower. I got a lot of injuries before I managed to escape. It took a long time before I happened to meet the adventurers who came here to rest. After being rescued, I stayed with them and made a name for myself along the way. Just as the team was gradually growing and we returned to the safe house, I met Alyssa. The safe house was breached, and Alyssa was infected with the zombie virus. Seeing my successful return, she was filled with nothing but jealousy. I couldn't bear to kill her, but she bit me before she died. I had no choice but to die with her. Given a chance to live again, I should really thank her for being willing to leave the hope of survival to me. As for the superpower, didn't she know? What belongs to me, no one can take away. The familiar electronic mechanical voice rang out at this moment. Host, welcome back. Long time no see, too, in an abandoned hospital in the suburbs. I was packing the medicine in the hospital together with my teammates. On the way to the safe house, I successfully connected with my system from my previous life and awakened my superpower. The base will issue an identity card to each person. One can accumulate exchange points by hunting zombies and other means to exchange for daily necessities and food, and I, within a month, cleared 5 zombie hordes and successfully saved the residents of an entire community, becoming widely known. I don't have great strength, but fortunately, with the blessing of my superpower, I am very agile. I can always kill a zombie with one strike when hunting them, but today, the mission took too long, and I was a bit exhausted. My mental strength of the superpower was also depleted. The long-term battle caused my blood sugar to drop, my palms were cold and trembling, and I bit my lower lip tightly, trying to hold on until I returned to the base. Autumn, be careful, my teammates' shout made me quickly perk up. When I turned my head, A zombie was rushing towards me at a very fast speed. Without time to think, I instinctively closed my eyes and swung my dagger, gurgling. It was the sound of the zombie's blood flowing into its throat after its head was cut off. I opened my eyes and met a pair of extremely gentle eyes. It was a somewhat familiar man, as if I had seen him somewhere before. Alexander. My teammate recognized him first. I remembered. It was the name that scrolled on the large screen of the base, Alexander. Who is agile and known as the god of war. Alexander reached out and helped me up, asking with concern, "Are you okay?" I shook my head, gritted my teeth, and tried to stand up straight, but I still felt a bit unable to do so. But he suddenly smiled and forcefully stuffed a fruit candy into my mouth. It was lemon-flavored, and I squinted my eyes due to the sourness. "Your name is Autumn." In the car on the way back, Alexander sat beside me and asked. I had regained some energy and nodded at him. "A group of people who claim to be adventurers came to the base today, and one of them has a name very similar to yours." He scratched his head in distress, as if recalling. "It seems to be called Ali." This sentence instantly raised my alertness to the maximum. My expression became serious immediately, and I interrupted him, saying the name first. "Alyssa." "Yes, that's the name, but you don't look like her at all." After hearing the name Alyssa, Alexander said very sincerely, "You look more pleasing to the eye than her." But I didn't have the time to care about his compliment to me. I reached out and patted my teammate in the driver's seat. "Drive faster, but it shouldn't be like this." According to the action trajectory in my previous life. At this time, I was on the way to find the safe house with the adventurers. Why did Alyssa come so quickly? 3. As soon as the SUV drove through the gate of the base, I saw Alyssa standing in the center of the crowd at a glance. She was surrounded by a group of adventurers. With a beaming smile on her face, I got out of the car, and when I saw Alyssa's face, I was quite shocked. The conditions in the end of the world were harsh. It was common to not have enough food to eat and not enough clothes to cover oneself. Even with the protection of the adventurers along the way, she had suffered a lot. At the moment, her cheeks were sunken, she was sallow and emaciated, and the long-term malnutrition had completely consumed all of her former baby fat. Even the black hair that she was so proud of had become dry, rough, and sparse on top of her head. Alexander's eyes kept turning between me and Alyssa. And he suddenly laughed out loud. I was a bit puzzled and turned my head to meet his gaze. He just reached out and patted my shoulder, saying meaningfully, "You have to be careful." Alexander left. I turned around and was about to leave. Just then, Alyssa caught a glimpse of me and choked out, "Sister." I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I had no choice but to turn around to see what tricks Alyssa could come up with. She pushed through the crowd and walked directly to my side. Her eyes filled with tears. I was a bit confused. She clearly made the choice herself. What was she crying for now? She grabbed my hand and started crying when I was still in shock. Tears rolled down her cheeks, and she looked very pitiful. "Sister, you clearly saw me. Why didn't you want to recognize me?" I didn't want to have a dispute with her in front of others and tried to pull my hand back forcefully. But Alyssa fell straight to the ground following the force of my pull. Her head hit the cement ground with a thud. Many people present couldn't bear to see her like this and quickly went over to help her up. "What's wrong with you? How could you be so cruel to your own sister?" It has come true, that saying. How can you know if there are people or ghosts around you until you are at your saddest moment? Alyssa refused their kindness and shook her head helplessly. "Sister, are you still angry with me? The other day, you lost your necklace and insisted that I go and find it for you, but when I came back, you had already gotten on the rescue plane, and you wouldn't turn back no matter how much I called you." She crawled to my side with her hands and feet, hugged my leg tightly, and explained tearfully, "I felt nothing inside, just thinking that my sister was really a good material for an actress." She trembled and took out a rusty necklace from her pocket, holding it in her hand like a precious treasure. "Sister, I found the necklace for you. Please don't be angry anymore, okay?" When the people around heard Alyssa's words, the looks in their eyes as they looked at me were filled with scrutiny. They started whispering. "I heard that she is still the second-ranked hunter. How could she do such a thing?" Some people even directly scolded me. "In the end of the world, having someone like this is like having a time bomb beside you. Abandoning her own sister among the zombie horde just for a necklace. She's really selfish." But the time bomb is Alyssa, and the selfish one is also Alyssa. My expression didn't change at all from beginning to end. The sisterly affection for Alyssa had already been completely consumed when we died together in my previous life. I'd rather go our separate ways, but she insisted on provoking me and even wanted to drown me in the saliva of others in this turbulent era, if I don't fight back. How can I be worthy of her scheming? Alyssa still held the necklace high, and her arm had already started to tremble. She stared at me through gritted teeth and mouthed at me, "You lost." I didn't care about the scolding from the people around. I just looked down at her with a cold tone. "Alyssa, do you dare to swear?" But she laughed self-deprecatingly, wiped the tears on her face, and nodded submissively. "Okay, sister, I won't say any more, since you don't want to admit it. I don't want to make things difficult for you either. Just don't be angry with me." The voices of the people around accusing me were getting louder and louder. I really admire her ability to stir up trouble. I was very annoyed in my heart and just wanted to leave here quickly, but a familiar voice came from behind. Autumn, you weren't so indecisive when you were killing zombies. For such a vicious sister, do you still want to save her face? I turned my head and met those eyes that seemed to be smiling but not smiling. It was Alexander. Beside him was a familiar figure. The rescue team member who saved me that day. When Alyssa saw him, her face instantly changed. She clearly didn't expect there to be a witness who would expose her ridiculous lies. Everyone, this is the volunteer who participated in the rescue that day. As the first-ranked hunter, as soon as Alexander opened his mouth, the trust level soared instantly. Everyone fell silent and waited quietly for the rescuer to speak. I remember you. The rescuer frowned and thought for a while. Then pointed at Alyssa. You volunteered to stay and wait for the next wave of rescue, and you voluntarily gave the chance to live to your sister. The crowd started whispering again. Didn't she say that her sister forced her to find the necklace? Sure enough, we can't just listen to one side of the story. I said Autumn didn't look like this kind of person. Alyssa, with her pale face, listened to everyone's discussions around her. She swallowed hard and tried to defend herself. It was all my sister who forced me to say that. She asked me to leave a good impression in front of others, but in front of the witness, all her explanations seemed very pale and powerless. I really wanted to laugh, but I held it back. Even a 3-year-old child has heard the story of the boy who cried wolf. Why did she expect those who had been deceived once to believe her again? The people around all cast wary glances at Alyssa. Some people had already taken a few steps back, as if they wanted to draw a clear line from her. Alyssa looked at all this in disbelief, and tears fell again. Are you afraid of her? Alexander came to my side at some point and asked me with a smile. Afraid? I almost laughed out loud. I just think there's no need to waste time on such a person. Just then, Alyssa covered her face and rushed out of the crowd, seemingly too ashamed to face it. You see, when the injury is not on oneself, one can't feel the pain. Guess whether those adventurers will take revenge on you. Alexander raised his chin, and I followed his gaze to the opposite side. Sure enough, they were the familiar faces from my previous life. I turned around and left, but Alexander followed behind me persistently. He reached out and patted my shoulder. Don't be afraid. I'll look out for you from now on. I might be the only one with superpowers in this world, with the memories of 2 lifetimes and the system that was reborn with me. Would I be afraid? I stopped in my tracks, pursed my lips, but still couldn't help it and cursed with a smile. Crazy. Alyssa moved into the best dormitory, and her prestige among the crowd suddenly rose again, after hearing about what she had done. I just wanted to curse. Idiot. She was so stupid that even though she was my own sister, I wanted to kill her with my own hands. Through making inquiries from various sources, I finally learned what had happened to Alyssa during this period. After I got on the rescue plane, she didn't encounter the zombie horde. Instead, she took the initiative to find the base of the adventurers and arrogantly demanded that they protect her. I was almost angry enough to laugh. Did she think those adventurers were some kind of heavenly soldiers descending from the sky? They were just a group of outlaws hiding under the guise of adventurers. Along the way, they burned, killed, looted, and committed all sorts of atrocities. In my previous life, after I was saved by that group of people, before I could even thank them, 4 or 5 burly men surrounded me. The greed in their eyes was not only for money but also a certain desire. I hastily took out all the valuable things on me, but what I got in return was their groping hands all over me, and I could only rely on my newly awakened superpower and use a dagger to slit the throat of one of them. Only then did I gain the fear of the others. I disdained to be with them, but in the face of the proposition of survival, I could only compromise. But Alyssa didn't have superpowers, and she couldn't be as resolute as I was. As expected, that group of adventurers beat her half to death. Just when they were about to succeed in their evil deeds, in a desperate situation, she revealed that she had been reborn, which gave her a chance to catch her breath. She led this group of people to avoid the attacks of the zombie horde several times and gradually established a foothold. This time was the same. She took the initiative to admit that she was a reborn person and was willing to act with the hunters. She predicted the direction of the zombie evolution correctly several times and led the hunters to avoid the attacks of the zombie horde. Both the researchers and the ordinary people praised her. It was as if everyone had forgotten her previous slander of me, but it didn't matter. I didn't mind. All the hunters wanted to go on missions with Alyssa, except Alexander. When I asked him about it, he was quite straightforward. I said it last time. She's not as pleasing to the eye as you. She affects my mood when killing zombies. I pursed my lips. There wasn't a single word of truth coming out of this man's mouth. Fortunately, Alexander and I had a very tacit cooperation. Without the need for others, we could still get a high number of exchange points, but I suddenly found that the exchange points in my identity card were actually decreasing more and more. I frowned and asked the staff member in charge of counting the exchange points, "Why are my exchange points decreasing?" He immediately started operating on the keyboard. When he saw a certain page, he let out a long sigh of relief. There's nothing wrong with the exchange points. There was a large-scale exchange on your side. Me, large-scale exchange, but I hadn't made any large-scale exchanges at all. The staff member turned the display screen towards me and showed it to me. The numbers on it were shocking. The base recently upgraded the system, and every transaction is clearly recorded, by the way. Now immediate family members can also use each other's exchange points. The staff member talked endlessly about the advancement of the system, but I keenly grasped the key point. Immediate family members. I leaned closer to the screen and carefully identified the small characters in the line of exchanger. Sure enough, it was as I had thought. Alyssa, 6. It was lunchtime now. Without having time to change out of my equipment, I hurried to the dining hall. I saw Alyssa at a glance. Surrounded by many people, she sat in the middle like the moon surrounded by stars, with a gentle smile on her face. It seemed that she really enjoyed the feeling of being the center of attention. When I got closer, I could hear their voices of conversation. It doesn't matter, you can order whatever you want, it's on me, Alyssa said casually. A little girl beside her opened her eyes wide. Really? I haven't eaten these things for a long time. Alyssa, you're so generous. When Alyssa heard this, the smile on her face became even wider. I gave a cold snort. Of course she can be generous. She's not using the exchange points that she fought for in the sea of corpses and blood. She actually has the nerve to be generous with other people's things. A surge of nameless anger welled up in my chest, and I immediately reached out and grabbed Alyssa's hair. Alyssa felt the pain, and her head had to tilt back following the force of my hand. In her panic, her pupils suddenly contracted. The little girl quickly stood up and tried to stop me. What are you doing? How can you hit someone? I ignored her and asked Alyssa word by word. Do you have any shame? A look of guilt flashed across Alyssa's face, and then she started to stubbornly argue. Sister, what do you mean by that? I know you don't like me. I've already kept my distance from you. Why are you treating me like this? She said these words very pitifully. As if I was bullying her, she had indeed kept her distance from me. But she didn't hold back at all when using my things. I was just about to question her when I was interrupted by the little girl beside me. How can you be like this? Let go of your hand quickly. Do you know who she is? She's the one who was reborn. Everyone in the whole base needs her protection. I turned my head and stared at her until she shut up, and then I spoke. Alyssa, is it really satisfying for you to act generous with my exchange points? Alyssa's tears fell instantly. Sister, I just feel sorry for Sophia. She just came to the base, and her body is still very weak. I really can't bear to see her not having enough to eat. The little girl named Sophia also started to choke up. I'll pay you back in the future. I disdainfully pursed my lips. Pay back? What can you use to pay back? You can only get 10 exchange points for hunting one zombie. I glanced at the sumptuous dishes on the table. This table of food must cost at least 100 exchange points. With your small stature, when will you be able to pay it back? Alyssa's mouth moved as if she wanted to say something, but I had already raised my hand and slapped her across the face. The clear sound directly attracted everyone's attention. How could she bear the shame of being slapped by me in full view of everyone? Her eyes were filled with hatred. Several onlookers couldn't stand it anymore and began to accuse me one after another. You have no compassion at all. Compassion. In the end of the world, whoever has compassion will die first. Alyssa, consider this meal as if I fed it to a dog, but you acted generous with my exchange points without my consent and lived in the most luxurious dormitory. Is it really being generous to be generous with other people's things? I sneered ironically. And those who had just spoken up for her immediately lowered their heads and remained silent. Alyssa's face turned pale, and she couldn't say anything either. Suddenly, a voice resounded through the base. Emergency notice! Emergency notice! A large number of zombie hordes have appeared in the northwest direction. Request for support. My eyes froze, and I immediately let go of the hand that was holding Alyssa and prepared to go to the battlefield. When I went out, I heard someone lift Alyssa up to a high place. Alyssa, you are reborn. You must know how to defeat the zombies this time, right? Alyssa's response was very guilty. Of course, and I also remembered that in my previous life, no zombie horde could break through the restriction 10 kilometers away. Could it be that our rebirth had created a butterfly effect? 7. Alexander and I arrived at the place where the zombies appeared first and observed the movements of the zombies in the corner. I took out a small notebook from my pocket and quickly wrote a few lines on it. Alexander leaned over to look at me. What are you writing? I then explained. Don't you think the frequency of the appearance of zombies has been getting higher and higher recently? I pointed to a zombie in the distance. It moves very fast. Even if its leg is broken and it crawls on the ground with its 2 hands, its speed still doesn't decrease. Before, these zombies could only chase humans by smell, but now they can also avoid some potholes. Alexander looked at me with an approving gaze. You've observed very carefully, but my heart sank heavily. They have evolved. These situations had never occurred in my previous life. Before I died, all the zombies were still very slow. Without time to think, my first reaction was to return to the base and tell the researchers in the Research Institute about this. I tightly grasped Alexander's sleeve, wanting to get in the car with him. But then Alyssa's voice came from behind. "Everyone, do as I say, and there will definitely be no problem." Her tone was very determined. A group of hunters cheered and even took out their weapons, planning to massacre this group of zombies. They didn't notice at all that after the zombies heard their voices, they directly followed the sound and came over, and they were even walking faster and faster. I gritted my teeth, thinking about whether I should save them or not. But Alexander had already put a dialed phone to my ear. "Safe House Research Institute, what's the matter?" I met his gaze and took a deep breath. "The zombie horde has evolved, and there are too many unknown risks. Please recall the hunters." After a short silence on the other end of the phone, a somewhat aged voice answered the phone. "Hello, I'm the director of the Research Institute. My name is Anthony. I've already heard what you just said." "Hello, Director Anthony." I was just about to continue talking about the danger of this matter, but Director Anthony gave me a piece of shocking news. The Research Institute in the Southwest region has already encountered such incidents of zombie evolution and attacks. He paused. "Being scratched by this group of zombies also poses a risk of infection, but we have already developed this vaccine, which can prevent the zombie virus to a certain extent." He wanted to say something more, but I had already hung up the phone. Something was wrong. I raised my head and looked in Alyssa's direction. This was also the first time I had seen so many zombies swarming up in groups. At first, they could still hold their own, but the zombies didn't feel tired, and many people were already exhausted. Alyssa clearly didn't expect things to be so serious, and she backed away in a panic. A zombie charged towards her accurately. Alyssa let out a scream. Before she could dodge, she casually grabbed a person beside her and blocked it in front of her. It was the girl named Sophia. Her arm was scratched by the zombie, and black-green liquid had already flowed out. This was a sign of mutation. Sophia probably couldn't understand either. The good sister she thought of would treat her like this. Alyssa looked around. No one noticed her. She picked up a dagger and directly slashed at Sophia's neck. The way she gritted her teeth. Where was the tenderness she had pretended in front of others? Only a furious shout was heard, which forcefully stopped her action. "Stop, 8. I couldn't hold back anymore. I shook off Alexander's hand that was holding me and rushed up. "What are you doing?" I looked at the dagger in Alyssa's hand and questioned her. She's been infected. "I'm saving everyone's lives," Alyssa said righteously. Sophia had already been so scared that she was crying and trembling all over. "Currently, there is no research to prove that being scratched will also lead to infection. If you wrongly kill her, can you bear the responsibility for this?" I gave Alyssa a fierce glare and snatched the dagger from her hand. "Sophia, don't be afraid. If I have to cut off your arm, but I can ensure that you will survive. Would you be willing?" I tried to make my tone as gentle as possible to soothe her. Sophia just kept shaking her head and crying. Alexander also came over. He was being so serious in front of me for the first time. "Are you sure?" Sophia couldn't make a decision for a long time, but the spread of the virus wouldn't give me any more time. I gritted my teeth and took out alcohol from my backpack that I carried with me and spilled it all on the dagger. My hands didn't stop, and I also replied to Alexander's question. "By the way, I never do things that I'm not sure about." I took out a towel, tied it firmly, and stuffed it into Sophia's mouth. "Endure it." With a swing of the knife, it fell. The infected stump was cut off by me. I quickly sprinkled on hemostatic powder and anesthetic to make her feel no pain for the time being. Sophia rolled her eyes and fainted. I wiped the cold sweat off my forehead. When I stood up, many people had already fallen down in front of me. Alyssa was already stunned by my actions. She roared and demanded that I pay with my life for Sophia. But at the moment, I didn't have the time to care about her. As I said just now, I never do things that I'm not sure about. This was true. Everyone thought that my superpower was agility, allowing me to accurately dodge the attacks of the zombies. No one knew that my real superpower was prophecy. At first, I could only predict the action of the next second. Through using it many times in training, I could now predict things that would happen within 3 days. I closed my eyes and tried my best to predict what would happen next in my mind, trying to find the weakness of the zombies, but the roars of the zombies and the screams of humans in my ears still made it impossible for me to concentrate my mental strength. I shook my head irritably, trying to block out these sounds, but the sounds suddenly became quieter. I opened my eyes in confusion and saw Alexander standing in front of me, holding a weapon in his hand. "Just focus on thinking. I'm here." He picked up the gun with a silencer, aimed at the zombie, and shot it in the head. At this moment, I also remembered the weaknesses of the zombies, the heart and the head. The sound of the horn gradually became louder. I picked up my weapon and quickly rushed into the zombie horde, killing several zombies in a row. Some people were already stunned and just stared at me blankly. They clearly realized that if they only listened to Alyssa, everyone would die here. "Autumn, please, save me." Many people shouted desperately. Alyssa, however, tried to disrupt their vision and still stubbornly claimed that she was reborn and could save them. I didn't have the time to care about her anymore. I'm not a saint. I don't want to waste my mental strength in vain. Today, everyone owes me their lives. After returning to the base, those who were saved by me must go and get the experimental vaccine injection. I frowned and roared towards the back. "If you want to live, do as I say." When I woke up again, I was already lying in a hospital bed, and my whole body felt as if it had been run over by a large truck. My mental strength had been exhausted, and I couldn't even remember what had happened before. I let out a sigh, but someone opened the door of the ward. "Director Anthony, this is the room. Is she still not awake?" The voices of several people talking reached my ears, and I opened my eyes again. Director Anthony. Wasn't he the director of the research institute who had talked to me on the phone? After I met his gaze, several people were all taken aback. Director Anthony reacted quickly. He walked up to me rapidly and asked me with a smile, "Autumn, is there anywhere else you feel uncomfortable?" I shook my head and tried my best to prop myself up on the bed with my hands and sit up. Director Anthony gave a meaningful look, and the others all walked out of the ward. And he also told me what had happened during the extermination of the zombies that day. After I revealed the weakness of the zombies, I rushed into the zombie horde and desperately saved everyone present. With their weakness exploited, the zombies were driven back step by step, but I suddenly fainted. Only I knew what was going on, in a situation where my mental strength was exhausted. My body naturally couldn't hold on for long. Alyssa mixed in with the crowd, rushed towards me, took out a dagger, and tried to kill me, but fortunately, I was saved by Alexander and quickly sent to the base hospital. Director Anthony sighed. "She's your own sister from the same mother. How could she be so vicious?" I didn't comment. I just stared blankly at the white wall in front of me, feeling that all the care I had once given her had been wasted. Why did Alyssa always want to kill me? The atmosphere in the ward became oppressive. Director Anthony cleared his throat and started a new topic. "Because of your promise that day, many people have voluntarily received the vaccine. The clinical trials were very successful. Thank you for everything you've done for humanity." I just gave a faint smile and didn't want to take the credit, but then I heard him change the subject. "By the way, it's strange that the young man who brought you to the hospital that day still hasn't been vaccinated." I frowned and thought about it in my mind. Alexander wasn't the kind of person who was afraid of death. He had saved me, twice. Just as I was lost in thought, the door of the ward suddenly opened. What came into view was that familiar, cynical face. The clothes on Alexander were covered in dust, obviously because he had walked a long way. He was holding a large bucket of fruit candies in his arms and smiled at me as if showing off his credit. I caught a glimpse of the yellow color wrapped in the plastic paper at a glance. Lemon flavor. We looked at each other, and both of us burst out laughing. 10. After being discharged from the hospital, I went to the room where Alyssa was being held. When the guards talked about her, they shook their heads helplessly. Alyssa always talks to herself and refuses to communicate with others. We suspect that there's something wrong with her mental state. Under the instructions of Director Anthony, I successfully entered Alyssa's room. She was sitting on the bed, muttering to the wall. When she caught a glimpse of me from the corner of her eye, the hatred in her eyes suddenly surged. She rushed up and grabbed my wrist. "Why? Clearly, I've lived 2 lives, yet I still end up like this. I was reborn. I will awaken my superpower, save all of humanity, and make everyone grateful to me." She seemed to be possessed, roaring and constantly asking me why. I just looked at her quietly. When she stopped talking, I said a sentence. "Why do you think you're the only one who was reborn?" This sentence was like a bolt from the blue, ringing above Alyssa's head. "You." She stared at me in shock, her lips trembling, unable to say a word, but she quickly rejected the idea in her mind. Or perhaps she didn't dare to face the truth. "It's impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Clearly I'm the chosen one. Only I can save humanity. You're just making up lies to deceive me." Her body went limp, and she collapsed to the ground, her face pale. I just thought she was pitiful. We had experienced so many things in our previous life. Given a chance to start over, she just wanted to follow in my footsteps. She didn't even want to use her brain to think. Alyssa suddenly went crazy. She roared, System, where are you? Come out. Didn't you say that I would save humanity? Didn't you say that I would be placed on a pedestal by everyone? You said that, as long as I killed Autumn and tripped Autumn up, everyone in this world would think highly of me." She kept hitting her head against the wall, trying to call out the system in her mind, and I also keenly extracted the key point from her words. Her system had ordered her to kill me, although I already had a system in my previous life. Besides telling me how to use my superpower, the system never said another word to me. Privately, I always thought that the system couldn't be something that would harm people. "Autumn, we'll meet in the next life." Alyssa had gone crazy. She tried to commit suicide, hoping to enter the cycle of rebirth again. I was quick-eyed and quick-handed, and I quickly dodged her figure as she charged towards me. Thud, she hit the wall. Blood splattered all over the wall. 11. Today was the day for the second batch of vaccine injections. I stood in the vaccination line and looked around, but still didn't see Alexander's figure. Last time, he missed the vaccination opportunity because he went to find fruit candies for me. This time, he didn't come again. Suddenly, like a flash of inspiration, I seemed to have grasped something. In my previous life, I had never heard of this person named Alexander. Could he be the uncontrollable factor of my rebirth? My shoulder was suddenly patted. And I turned around, just meeting those smiling eyes. Hi, my face immediately turned gloomy. And I gripped the dagger at my waist tightly, asking him coldly, "Who are you?" Alexander was taken aback for a moment, and the smile on his face gradually widened. "You found out." He waved his hand casually, and time was frozen. There wasn't even the sound of breathing around. It was eerily quiet. He walked slowly to the side, pulled over a chair, and sat down. "Sure enough, I didn't misjudge you. You still haven't answered my question." Sweat had already broken out on my palms. But I still held the dagger tightly and didn't take a step back. "Me," Alexander raised his eyebrows. "I'm the creator god of this world." 12. I was the one chosen by Alexander. My system and my superpower were all given to me by him. In my previous life, I was bitten by Alyssa. I would rather drag her to die together than hurt others. But in Alexander's eyes, this was a manifestation of my being a saint. "The end of the world doesn't support saints," he said meaningfully. He showed mercy and gave me a second chance to live my life again. At the same time, he also arranged a new identity for Alyssa. He wanted Alyssa to be a stumbling block for me. Alyssa was brainwashed by the so-called system and tried every means to kill me, but I easily resolved it, and Alexander, just by helping me once, was able to make me lower my guard against him. He was overjoyed, you know. "On the day you rushed up to save people, I thought I was going to fail again. You're still the same saint." He was referring to the time when I risked my own safety and exhausted my mental strength to save others. "You made them exchange their cooperation in the experiment for their lives." I was very surprised. Alexander was looking at me as if I were a flower that he had carefully nurtured himself, and he was very satisfied. No wonder he was so at ease among the zombie horde. Never took the initiative to kill, and always stayed away from the crowd. No wonder he tried so hard to stay by my side and form a team with me. It turned out that it was just to make it convenient for him to observe my every move. I just found it ridiculous. How many lives were there in the whole world? How many people would he kill because of a so-called experiment? I took a step back, feeling a surge of anger. The next moment, I would hardly be able to resist stabbing the dagger into his chest. But he burst out laughing. "Okay, don't be angry. Come with me." "Where to?" I asked, pretending not to understand. "To the sky. There are no messy zombies there, and there are no weak people who need your protection." He sneered at my question, but didn't he know that these zombies were all his doing? The zombies that he found disgusting were the daily lives of us ordinary humans. It might take a lifetime to get out of this situation. I avoided the hand he extended towards me and cast my gaze on the people around. I asked him, "What do you see?" 13. People, zombies, or the desire to survive of these creatures, but I only see a god who thinks highly of himself and calls himself a god, doing whatever it takes to achieve his goals. Is this what a god is? We're just prey, being played with in your hands. All living things are suffering, and the world is in ruins. Is this what you want to see? I met his gaze neither humbly nor arrogantly. Alexander just sneered. "The end of the world doesn't need saints. The people who can survive don't care about the death of humanity at all, except you." He disdainfully pursed his lips and left 4 words behind. The experiment failed. In his eyes, I, who spoke for humanity, was a saint. But was that really the case? I didn't think I was wrong. I wanted to save all of humanity, and I also wanted to save myself. 14. When I heard these words, I suddenly realized that I had been reborn. Bow took away my superpower. I was still standing in the vaccination line, moving forward bit by bit with the crowd. "My wife is pregnant." A man was chatting happily with the people around him. "New life in the end of the world always makes people feel shocked. So, it doesn't matter if I'm a bit of a saint. There are always people who care about the current life, including me." Story 2. I am a fisherman on a small island, rising with the sun to work and resting as the sun sets. A doomsday virus swept through, and I had thought that this isolated ocean island would be my haven. Unexpectedly, a zombie whale astonishingly appeared and swallowed a fleeing fishing boat in one bite. It seems that even the vast ocean has become a place where zombies run wild. 1. My name is Olivia. The island I live on is called Japan Island, which is about 41 nautical miles away from the mainland. For our daily necessities, we usually go to Bishia Island, which is 2 or 3 nautical miles away, to purchase them. Bishia Island isn't very big either. There are only about more than 100 households living there. There is no direct passenger ship to Japan Island. If outsiders want to visit our island, they must first arrive at Bishia Island and then take a small fishing boat from there to reach Japan Island. Similarly, the express delivery service can only be delivered to Bishia Island. Japan Island is surrounded by the sea on all sides, with steep cliffs along the island's edge. There is only one entrance on the side facing the deep sea, and this entrance is also used as a small pier. In addition, a sluice gate has been built at the entrance, which can block the access when necessary. There were originally not many people on Japan Island, about 50 households. However, due to the current policy of relocating from small islands to large islands and building new settlements, there are now only 10 households left on this island. I also have an elder brother who left the island to study in a big city university. Our relationship isn't very close. In fact, my brother is even less affectionate towards me than my dog Jojo. Actually, my brother doesn't deliberately treat me coldly, it's just that we meet rarely and are far apart, although my parents aren't biased. Their educational concepts are rather backward. Although I had excellent grades when I graduated from junior high school, my parents didn't support me in continuing my high school education. They preferred that I stay with them, engage in fishing and aquaculture to make a living, and wait to get married in the future. Japan Island isn't large in area, but the infrastructure on the island is complete, including the internet, electricity, and communication. However, these facilities are occasionally affected by the weather and become unstable. In my spare time, I also relax by reading online novels and browsing short videos, but I prefer to have an intimate contact with the sea. I like to stroll along the beach, listen to the surging sound of the waves, and enjoy the magnificent sunrise and sunset. Here, I can fully enjoy the fun of beachcombing and fishing, or just quietly gaze at the sea and savor the peace and freedom. On the night of June 1st, I tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep, so I ran to the beach, blew the sea breeze, listened to the sound of the waves, and was lost in my own thoughts. Under the night sky, the island was immersed in tranquility. The air was filled with the smell of seawater and the unique coolness of the night. Suddenly, a gorgeous brilliance emerged on the horizon. It was different from the moonlight and starlight, showing an unprecedented strange charm. This brilliance was like flowing colored silk, dancing in the night sky, colorful and ever-changing. Its unique beauty attracted the uncles on the island. They all walked out of their houses and looked up at this charming night sky. The brilliance sometimes rolled like green waves in the air, and sometimes fluttered like a purple ribbon. It shone together with the stars, jointly painting a magnificent and strange picture of the night sky. However, this beautiful brilliance was not just an astronomical phenomenon. As the brilliance continued to shine, the wires on the island suddenly started smoking and hissing. Then, all the lights on the island went out at once, and the whole island was enveloped in darkness. At the same time, the island's broadcast speaker emitted a harsh sound, as if it was being interfered with. The sound was intermittent, sharp and piercing. I tried to record this strange scene with my mobile phone, but strangely, the phone couldn't be turned on. Urged by my mother, I hurried home, and my father and the uncles were busy putting out the fire on the wires. The electricity on the small island had been completely cut off. Nevertheless, our lives were not greatly affected. Everything was as usual, and we still had enough to eat, drink, and have fun. We just had to wait patiently for the electricity to be restored. Over the years, we have given up deep-sea fishing and instead adopted the method of aquaculture, using cages to make a living. Whenever the harvest season arrives, we will transport the fresh seafood to Bishia Island for sale. However, this time when I arrived at Bishia Island, I found that the whole island was without electricity, and the passenger ships on the island were also suspended due to maintenance. To make matters worse, most smartphones couldn't be turned on. Only a few elderly phones could barely be powered on, but even so, they still couldn't receive any mobile phone signals. The fishermen didn't show signs of panic. During the typhoon-prone season, power outages and communication breakdowns have become common occurrences for them. However, it was indeed unexpected to encounter such a large-scale failure on such a calm day. Everyone still went about their work in an orderly manner, and they could even jokingly guess which leader's negligence had caused such a big accident. However, they didn't know that since yesterday, the whole world had undergone earth-shaking changes. It's just that due to the relative isolation of the island's information, they hadn't yet noticed the great upheaval. 2. Vegetables and fruits are expensive on the island, so I have been trying to grow various vegetables and fruits myself. This can not only save expenses but also allow me to taste fresher fruits and vegetables. To my delight, my express delivery wasn't affected. The large number of fruit and vegetable seeds I purchased online some time ago were delivered to Bishia Island yesterday. So, this time I didn't return empty-handed. On Bishia Island, I also bought some daily necessities, which were all prepared for elders like Aunt Sienna, Dylan, and Madeline. Now, I am rowing a small boat loaded with goods, gently floating on the sea. The sea breeze blows gently, and the small boat sways slightly in the sparkling sea water, just like a baby in a cradle, giving people a comfortable and peaceful feeling. Jojo is closely beside me. I gently stroke its head, and it affectionately rubs against me. We seem to be enjoying this intimate moment. Occasionally, I would gently push it into the water when it wasn't paying attention, and then we would frolic in the sea together. Sometimes, Jojo could even catch a fish and then proudly show me its prey. The golden sun shines on us. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and fully enjoy the comfort and harmony from nature. Rowing the small boat back to Japan Island, Jojo obediently follows beside me. ready to help me carry the goods. We walk through the alleys together and send the goods that Aunt Sienna, Dylan, and Madeline purchase to their homes. Every time we arrive at a doorstep, Jojo will wag its tail and show its friendliness to them. After sending the goods and returning home, as soon as I enter the door, I smell the fragrant aroma of the cooked meal. My mother has already served the cooked fish and steamed rice on the table. It is steaming hot and looks very appetizing, Mom. There was also a power outage on Bisha Island, I said as I sat down. The passenger ships are also broken. There is a passenger ship docked at the pier and can't go to sea. My mother smiled and replied, power outages have indeed been less frequent in recent years, but they used to be common. Don't worry, just wait. Let's have dinner first and not starve ourselves. Where's my dad? I looked around but didn't see my father. Your dad and Owen went to repair the wires, my mother explained. We can't just rely on people from outside to come and fix it. We have to find a way to solve the problem ourselves. They will also check if the diesel generator can still be used, by the way. I nodded. Then I suddenly thought of my brother and asked my mother, have you contacted my brother these days? When will he be back? My mother sighed. I was going to contact him these days, but with this power outage, there's no signal either. We'll talk about it when the signal is restored. They study in the city, and their life should be much more comfortable than ours on this island. The island is still peaceful and quiet. 3. According to the usual practice, the electricity maintenance workers should have arrived long ago, but they haven't been seen these days. Both Dapan Island and Bisha Island are still without electricity, and there is still no signal on the mobile phones. Although we are on an isolated island with limited information, we can still catch some news from the outside world through the radio. However, the news coming from the radio is shocking. The severity of this solar storm has reached an unprecedented level. The impact of the power outage is extremely widespread and has affected the whole world. But the restoration work is being carried out in an orderly manner. On June 18th, I went to Bisha Island again to purchase goods for everyone. This time, after arriving at the pier of Bisha Island, I felt that the island was obviously much quieter. After asking around, I learned that since the passenger ship was repaired and went to sea a few days ago, it had never returned and there was no news of its return. Some islanders took this ship to go out and do business, and they have been missing ever since. With the communication cut off, it is impossible to get in touch with those islanders who went out. Bisha Island originally had a small population, and now their departure has made the island even more desolate. After purchasing the necessary items, I was about to return to Dapan Island with Jojo. However, suddenly, it seemed that everything around fell into a deathly silence. Only Jojo barked furiously towards the distance, breaking the silence. I looked in the direction where Jojo was barking. On the sea level, there was a faint small black dot, which was looming under the sunlight. As the black dot gradually became larger, I was shocked to find that it was actually a small passenger ship, rushing straight towards the pier without any sign of slowing down. The people on the pier began to scream in panic. Some people tried to escape, but it was already too late. The engine of the passenger ship roared continuously, echoing on the empty pier, deafening. It was like a runaway beast, rushing towards the pier crazily. Then, with a loud bang, the passenger ship crashed into the pier. The huge impact made the whole pier tremble, as if it might collapse at any moment. The sound of the impact was deafening, accompanied by the sound of wood tearing and metal twisting. The hull of the passenger ship was deeply embedded in the wooden piles of the pier, and sawdust flew everywhere. Fortunately, there weren't many people on the pier, but people were still shaken off balance. Some fell to the ground, and some lost their equilibrium. Dust and sawdust filled the air, making the vision blurry. The scene was once very chaotic, and people fled in all directions. However, Jojo still barked furiously at the passenger ship, as if there was something terrifying on the ship. I took a closer look, and the passenger ship was indeed a bit strange. It seemed empty, and I didn't see anyone on it. Just as I was feeling suspicious, a foul stench wafted over. Then, ayo 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 ayo, a low and wild roar echoed on the pier, making people's hair stand on end. I was so scared that I quickly pulled Jojo and ran towards my small boat. I quickly started the engine and drove away from the pier, but I couldn't help but quietly observe the situation from a distance. The people on the pier seemed to have recovered from the shock. Some people bravely climbed into the passenger ship, wanting to find out what was going on. However, at this moment, several twisted monsters suddenly rushed out of the passenger ship, pounced on the people on the pier, and frantically bit them. The pier was lost in an instant, and cries of pain rose one after another, making people terrified. Then, more monsters rushed out of the passenger ship. The number was astonishing, far exceeding the number of fishermen present. The pier suddenly fell into chaos and panic, like a living hell. A few people started to flee towards the interior of the island, and some, like me, quickly left the pier in a small boat. Some people were so panicked that they jumped directly into the sea to escape. Oh my god, zombies. This is just like the zombies I read about in novels, I exclaimed, and my legs couldn't help but tremble. Jojo also barked wildly beside me, as if cheering me on. I trembled and turned the small boat around, speeding towards Dapan Island. I must tell everyone this news as soon as possible. There are zombies on Bishia Island. Everyone, never go to Bishia Island again. For, when I returned to Japan Island, I eagerly told my mother everything I had seen and heard. To my surprise, she actually doubted it, thinking that I had too much imagination because I had read too many novels. At that time, my father wasn't at home, and I couldn't ask him for confirmation or support. I chose to ignore the anger on my mother's face and turned around to rush to Dylan's house with Jojo. Dylan is the most respected person on our small island, and my Jojo was given to me by him. I urgently told Dylan what I had seen and heard on Bishia Island. He didn't react as strongly as my mother did. Instead, he looked at me thoughtfully. I said anxiously, "Dylan, Jojo also saw it. We were together all the time." Dylan stroked Jojo's head, and Jojo whined Dylan's feet. Woo woo woo. Then Dylan asked, "Are there really the zombies you mentioned?" "Really, Dylan, they are exactly the same as those described in the novels. They bite people on sight and are very terrifying, but I didn't see if the people who were bitten also turned into zombies," I explained eagerly. Dylan has a clear mind, and he further asked, "You mean, the zombies can also spread the infection?" "Dylan, that's how it is written in the novels. People who are bitten or scratched by zombies will turn into zombies, and the only way to kill a zombie is to shoot it in the head," I explained in detail. It seemed that Dylan believed me. He immediately went out to call people and asked me to go home first. Dylan arranged for people to close the sluice gate of our island first to prevent outsiders from entering. Then he called a meeting of the islanders to discuss countermeasures. At the meeting, my mother still didn't believe what I said. She said in front of Dylan, "Dylan, don't listen to Olivia talking nonsense. This child has read too many novels." However, Dylan ignored my mother, glared at her, and told her to shut up. Then he turned to my father and said, "Eli, you have the best swimming skills. You go over and check the situation to confirm the specific situation for us. But be very careful and don't go ashore rashly." "Dylan, I'll go right away." My father responded immediately when I heard this. I was worried that my father didn't understand the danger of the zombies. After all, he hadn't read the relevant novels, so I insisted on going with my father, and I also have very good swimming skills. So Dylan, along with several people, came with us to the sluice gate. There were already some foreign fishermen at the small pier outside, making a racket and demanding to enter the island, but they were stopped. Although these fishermen were cursing, they never mentioned the situation on Bishia Island, which made Dylan and the others more certain that something had happened. Dylan stayed at the sluice gate with people. He clearly stipulated that outsiders were not allowed to enter the island during this period. The islanders who newly returned to the island must undergo a physical examination before entering. Only those without wounds on their bodies are allowed to enter. If there are wounds, they need to wait for my father and me to come back before making a decision. This is the advantage of having a small population on the island. With fewer people, everyone is united, and the implementation is fast. When my father and I approached Bishia Island again, from a distance, the pier was empty. This scene increased our tension and fear. My father steered the boat and turned off the engine far away from the pier. Then we rowed the boat with our hands, approaching the pier cautiously. I was filled with fear and confusion in my heart, because I didn't know if the zombies could swim and move freely in the sea. If the zombies could really swim in the sea, then we would really have nowhere to escape. 5. The pier of Bishia Island has returned to silence. The sunlight slants on the sea, and the waves are sparkling, but the scene at the pier is shocking. From a distance, the blood on the ground has dried up, showing a dark color, contrasting with the damaged boats and scattered wooden boards around, painting a desolate picture. The air is filled with a disgusting stench, making people frown involuntarily. Looking towards the island, it is completely silent. There are no people or zombies in sight. Some of the buildings on the island are damaged, and there are also patches of blood on some of the roads, as if telling the story of the fierce battle that took place before. Jojo rubs against me, gently nudging my thigh with its head. I lower my head, meet its eyes looking at me, and then its gaze turns to the dilapidated passenger ship, as if reminding me that there is still something hidden inside the ship. I said eagerly, "Dad, you believe me now, right? There really are zombies. I'm not doubting you. If I didn't believe you, why would I be here? Judging from the situation, there aren't many survivors outside." Dad said in a deep voice, "Dad, let's not get too close. Look at Jojo's appearance. There might still be zombies in the passenger ship. Let's not startle them. Keep our distance." I reminded, "Olivia, in the novels you've read, how can we kill these zombies? And will this thing be contagious?" Dad asked seriously. "Dad, in the novels, to kill a zombie, you have to shoot it in the head, and if you're bitten or scratched by a zombie, you'll turn into one," I explained. Dad steered the small boat away from the pier, and we quietly stared at Bishia Island. Suddenly, a few zombies appeared on the street. They were covered in blood and staggered around the street. I took a closer look and was horrified to find that one of the zombies was actually Aunt Wang, who was in charge of the express delivery. Her face was twisted, her movements were stiff, and she no longer had the kindness she used to have. I tightly grabbed Dad's arm, my eyes filled with fear. Dad also recognized those zombies. He quickly covered my mouth to prevent me from screaming out of fear. His eyes warned me that we had to stay quiet now. Dad held the rudder tightly and steadily steered the boat away from the pier. He didn't say anything, but I knew he wanted to take us away from this terrifying place. After getting far away from Bisha Island, Dad finally let out a sigh and said, "It seems that not many people survived. This thing can really spread." "According to what you said, Antwine might have turned into a zombie not long after being bitten," I asked a little fearfully. "Dad, what should we do then? We have to ensure the safety of our island and not let people from outside in. As long as no one on our island gets infected, we'll all be safe," Dad said firmly. Just as I thought Dad was going to drive the small boat back to Japan Island, he suddenly said, "Olivia, you stay here and wait for me with the boat. I'm going to check in the water." I was puzzled and couldn't help asking, "Dad, what are you going to check in the water?" Dad said in a deep voice, "I'm worried that there are zombies in the sea too. That would be really troublesome." My heart tightened. Dad, I didn't want him to go down to the bottom of the sea, afraid that he would be in danger, but he smiled and comforted me. "It's okay, don't you know my swimming skills? I have to confirm whether there are zombies in the sea so that our island can be truly safe. If there are zombies, the island will be in danger." He told me to stay quiet and wait patiently. If he didn't come back within an hour, I should go home directly. There was no need to wait for him anymore, which might mean that he had run into trouble and had fled in another direction. I responded, "Dad, be careful." He smiled at me, stroked my head, and then resolutely jumped into the sea. I was extremely anxious on the boat, constantly looking out at the sea, silently praying in my heart. What if there were really zombies at the bottom of the sea? I couldn't bear to think about that terrifying scene and silently prayed that my worries were just unfounded and that Dad would come back safely. The waiting process felt extremely long and anxious until I finally saw Dad surface again. He was obviously a bit exhausted, and the anxious expression on his face was hard to hide, but he pressed his lips tightly together, trying not to make a sound. My heart tightened. At this time, Jojo reacted faster than me. Without hesitation, it jumped into the sea to support my dad. I also quickly rowed the boat over and, together with Jojo, dragged Dad onto the boat. As soon as Dad got on the boat, he gasped and said urgently, "Let's go quickly." I immediately started the engine and drove the small boat quickly towards the direction of Japan Island. However, Dad shouted anxiously, "We can't go directly to Japan Island." My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at Dad with confusion. I saw that he had a serious expression on his face, pointed in another direction, and still said weakly, "Let's go there first. I found zombies at the bottom of the sea. We can't go back to the island directly." The sound of the engine might attract the zombies to Japan Island. Hearing Dad's words, I was shocked, but I also understood his concerns and considerations. I immediately adjusted the course and drove in the direction Dad pointed, hoping that we could find a safe place and then plan to return to the island again. 6. Under Dad's tense command, we took the risk of sailing away from the direction of Japan Island and went deeper into the sea. The sound of my heartbeat echoed in the vast ocean, intertwining with the sound of the waves crashing against the boat, creating an overwhelming sense of tension. We didn't start to cautiously return to Japan Island until we had bypassed Bisha Island from a distance. "Dad, what exactly happened at the bottom of the sea?" I asked in a slightly trembling voice. Dad took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "The situation is not good. I saw several zombies sink to the bottom of the sea. They didn't die but entered a strange dormant state. When I got closer, they seemed to be able to sense the sound and were instantly awakened, clumsily chasing after me at the bottom of the sea. Fortunately, the zombies don't seem to be able to swim, otherwise I might not have been able to escape." I asked in confusion, "If the zombies can't swim, they shouldn't be able to float up, so the threat to us should be relatively small, right?" Dad shook his head, and a deep sense of worry was evident in his eyes. "Although the zombies can't swim, as long as they don't die, no one can predict where they will wander along the seabed." My heart tightened, and I asked in horror, "The zombies won't go to Japan Island, will they?" Dad was silent for a while before slowly saying, "That's why I changed the course. The zombies move slowly and can't catch up with us, but we have to be careful to lead them away from Japan Island." I let out a sigh of relief but was still lingering with fear. "Then I'm relieved." Dad patted me on the shoulder and comforted me, "Don't worry too much. Japan Island is surrounded by steep cliffs, and it's very difficult for the zombies to climb up, but we have to pay attention to other nearby islands with gentle beaches. Those islands may be more dangerous." He paused for a moment and continued, "These zombies won't die in the sea, and this will sooner or later become a huge threat. What I'm most worried about now is that the fish in this water area may be affected." Worry was written all over Dad's face. "If there are zombie fish, then we're really in trouble." The word zombie fish made my heart skip a beat, and a chill rushed from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. I couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be if the fish in the ocean all turned into zombies. I asked in a trembling voice, "Dad, you mean the zombie virus might infect the marine fish?" Dad nodded, frowning. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm most worried about. If the fish are infected, we'll lose an important source of food, and then we'll really be in a desperate situation." I felt a deep sense of fear, as if I could already see hordes of zombie fish swimming wildly in the sea, attacking all living things, and what Dad was worried about was that we would run out of food, and his concern was indeed reasonable. I tried to stay calm and asked in a slightly trembling voice, "Dad, so what should we do now?" Dad smiled bitterly and shook his head. "There's no better way for us now. We can only go back and discuss countermeasures with Dylan. I don't know what the situation on land will be like either." 7. When we returned to Japan Island, there was a large crowd at the pier. Many fishermen were showing signs of anxiety and helplessness because they couldn't board the island. Dylan stood firmly at the entrance of the island like a door god, facing the noisy crowd. There was an unwavering determination in his eyes. "Eli, are you really so heartless?" A familiar fisherman saw my father and asked with a mix of accusation and confusion in his tone. Father frowned, looked around, and then said in a deep voice, "Do you want the zombies outside to hear you if you keep shouting like this?" His words made the surrounding noise drop instantly. The fishermen's faces showed expressions of horror, and they all rushed towards my father, eagerly asking about the situation outside. However, Father didn't say much. He just pressed his lips tightly and led me through the crowd into the island. Seeing us come back, Dylan's tense expression relaxed a little. We described the situation of the zombies outside to him in detail and told him the fact that the zombies could survive in the sea. After hearing this, he took a deep breath but still remained calm. "What should we do now?" Kai beside him looked a little panicked. "My son is still outside." "My son is also outside, and the situation is still unclear now," my father said in a deep voice, "but we must first ensure the safety of the island. Only when the island is safe can we have the energy to care about our relatives outside." Everyone nodded silently, and the atmosphere became heavy and depressing. Dylan looked around and slowly said, "What about those people still at the pier? Should we let them in? They are all our fellow villagers, and we should let them in." Uncle Wang expressed his opinion first. Dylan remained silent, obviously weighing the pros and cons. "The resources on our island are limited after all." Kai raised a practical concern. "If so many people pour in all at once, food and water will become problems. Moreover, if there are too many outsiders, how can we manage them? We have to guard against them taking over." Kai's concerns are reasonable. My father nodded in agreement. "Indeed, we can't take risks easily in this situation." After a fierce discussion, Dylan finally made a decision. He said, "Well, let the children, the elderly, and pregnant women enter the island for shelter. As for the others, they can only fend for themselves. We will try our best to provide help, but our top priority is to ensure the safety of our own people." However, the fishermen outside had already been waiting impatiently. When Dylan walked out of the sluice gate, they started cursing loudly. Dylan turned a deaf ear to these curses and just explained the current situation to them. "According to the information we have, these zombies won't die even at the bottom of the sea. They can walk slowly at the bottom of the sea. If you are bitten or scratched by a zombie, you may be infected and eventually turn into a monster. Therefore, everyone must stay away from those who have been scratched or bitten. In addition, we are still not sure whether the fish nearby are safe, whether there are mutated fish, or even if the current sea fish can still be eaten." Then, Dylan added, "Children, the elderly, and pregnant women can enter the island for temporary shelter, but before entering, we must check whether there are any wounds on their bodies. The others, please go to other islands to seek shelter. The resources of our small island are limited, and we really can't accommodate too many people." Although the crowd still expressed dissatisfaction, some fishermen with elderly people and children chose to accept this arrangement. So, several elderly people, children, and pregnant women were able to enter the island smoothly and were settled down. However, the fishermen who didn't have the opportunity to enter the island didn't leave the pier. In addition, some fishermen driving large fishing boats also stayed nearby. They seemed to be considering whether to go to other islands. Just then, a shrill scream cut through the hustle and bustle of the pier. "Husband, what's wrong with you?" Everyone's heart skipped a beat, and their eyes instantly focused on the man beside the screaming woman. The man's eyes were bloodshot, his face was gray and ferocious, his facial muscles twitched involuntarily, and his limbs twisted in an unnatural way. Every joint made a creaking sound. The fishermen who had experienced the incident on Bishia Island immediately understood what was happening. Without hesitation, they rushed back to their boats to escape. However, the woman was at a loss. There was only her strange-looking husband in her eyes, and she kept calling his name, her voice full of helplessness and despair. It wasn't until the man suddenly pounced on her, his sharp teeth biting hard into her neck, and blood spurted out that her call stopped abruptly. The whole pier instantly fell into chaos and panic. The fishermen who had originally gathered at the pier fled in all directions, the engines of the fishing boats roared, and the fishermen scrambled to drive their boats away from this terrifying hell. Dylan's eyes were cold. Without hesitation, he closed the sluice gate again, isolating the chaos and danger outside the island. Several fishermen were knocked down by the rushing zombies before they could escape in time and were then brutally bitten and chewed. Behind the sluice gate, we witnessed this thrilling scene. The bloody and terrifying scene made our hearts tremble. Some people couldn't bear the strong visual impact and couldn't help vomiting. Fortunately, our island has a solid sluice gate as a barrier, and those ferocious zombies will definitely not be able to invade this last haven, however. This also means that we are trapped on this isolated island and can't go out. 8. I stared at a slightly larger fishing boat in the distance. It was sailing towards the direction of the deep sea. However, an even greater and indescribable fear welled up in my heart. A foul stench hit my nose. This smell was like a mixture of rotting flesh and seawater, making people want to vomit. I covered my mouth and nose, but I couldn't completely block out this suffocating smell. Suddenly, a low rumbling sound came from a distance, getting closer and closer, shaking everyone's eardrums. We looked up and saw the sea surface start to churn, and the waves rolled. A huge whale leaped out of the water. Its body was twisted and swollen, its skin was grayish-green and mottled, and it exuded a rotting smell. It was a huge whale, but it was no longer the gentle marine creature that people were familiar with. Its body was twisted and swollen, and its skin showed an unhealthy grayish-green color, covered with mottled ulcers and rotting marks. The pair of eyes that should have been gentle and deep were now blood-red and cloudy, exuding a creepy cold light. This whale had turned into a zombie. It opened its huge mouthparts, revealing long and sharp teeth. These teeth were no longer the sieve plates used to filter plankton but had become sharp weapons for tearing flesh. It suddenly leaped out of the water, bringing with it a disgusting stench of decay, and rushed straight towards the defenseless fishing boat. The fishermen on the fishing boat screamed in panic and fled in all directions, but in the face of this huge zombie whale, their struggles seemed so insignificant. The zombie whale opened its huge mouth and suddenly sucked in, actually swallowing the entire fishing boat in one bite. The screams on the boat stopped abruptly, and everything returned to silence. This zombie whale crashed around in the sea, setting off huge waves. The waves splashed dozens of meters high, as if they were going to block out the sky and the sun. The waves became more and more turbulent under the agitation of the zombie whale, crashing violently against the coast of the island, making a deafening roar, which made people tremble with fear. At this moment, we finally realized that zombie fish were no longer a legend but had truly appeared in front of us. The zombie whale rampaged in the sea. Every time it swam, it brought up a bloody storm. The stench it exuded was disgusting, as if even the sea breeze couldn't blow away this breath of death. I stood on the small island, looking at the disaster happening on the sea surface from a distance, and my heart was shrouded in deep fear and despair. Behind the sluice gate, everyone who had gathered there was now plunged into unprecedented panic and despair. We stared at the towering waves set off by the zombie whale on the sea surface, and the tragic cries of the fishermen on the distant fishing boats echoed in our ears. Our hearts were filled with powerlessness and fear. The world in front of us had already been turned upside down, and everything had become strange and terrifying. Those things that we used to be familiar with and close to now all wore a strange and terrifying coat. Those marine creatures that we used to regard as friends and companions had now turned into deadly hunters. The appearance of the zombie whale was undoubtedly a cruel subversion of our past cognition. This world was no longer the peaceful and serene place that we remembered. 9. Everyone go back. Don't gather here, or you might attract other zombies, Dylan said calmly. Everyone nodded and tacitly went back to their homes. When I got home, I saw my mother secretly wiping tears in the corner. She was obviously worried about my brother who was far away. My heart tightened, but there was nothing I could do. Dad walked over and gently hugged Mom, comforting her softly. Dear, don't worry too much. Our child has his own destiny. There's no use worrying. The most important thing now is for us to stay alive. Only by staying alive will there be a chance to meet again in the future. Dad's voice was a little trembling, and his eyes were also slightly moist. Jojo seemed to have sensed the sad atmosphere at home. It rubbed against my calf and whined softly, as if resonating with my sadness. As night fell, Dylan called everyone to his home for a meeting again and specifically asked me to come. He seemed to think that I knew the most about zombies. After all, only I had come into contact with the strange world of these zombies through reading novels. At the meeting, Dylan said solemnly, "Since yesterday, the radio has stopped receiving any news from the outside world." This news was like a bombshell, instantly causing an uproar at the meeting. Everyone was panicked and started talking animatedly. Not receiving any news meant that the radio stations within a radius of hundreds of miles were no longer operating. What did this imply? These areas might all have been overrun by zombies. Dylan looked around and then continued, "There's no use panicking in the face of such a great disaster. We must first save ourselves." Everyone talked in a hubbub. Finally, several matters were discussed and decided. First, in order to make more efficient use of resources, starting tomorrow, we will have communal meals at the Temple of the Heavenly Palace Goddess, and centralize our food reserves. Second, to ensure the safety of the island, we will implement a 3-shift system and set up 24-hour guards at the island's sluice gate. At the same time, we will also patrol the entire island regularly to ensure there are no security risks. Third, We will organize the capable women to jointly open up wasteland and grow grains and vegetables. We can't just rely on our existing food and must be prepared for long-term survival. Fourth, Olivia will lead the children to take on the task of raising poultry and livestock, including chickens, dogs, and rabbits. At the same time, she will also be responsible for receiving radio news so that we can keep abreast of the situation outside. Fifth, Dylan will be responsible for finding a way to clear the zombies at the sluice gate and eliminate this direct threat at our doorstep. Sixth, since the island's grain storage is limited, we will use the existing corn and wheat seeds to open up fields for planting. Fortunately, Olivia purchased a large number of vegetable seeds before, so our supply of vegetable seeds is sufficient. Aunt Sienna and my mother, who are experienced in farming as they married here from the mainland, will be in charge of this work. Seventh, to ensure food safety, the island will temporarily ban the consumption of fresh sea fish and only use dried fish and other preserved foods. Eli will be responsible for catching fresh fish and feeding them to some of the puppies, rabbits, and chicks to observe whether they will turn into zombies. If there are no abnormal changes after a week, we will consider allowing the consumption of seafood products again. Eighth, the pregnant women on the island will be taken care of by several elderly people who came from outside the island. Currently, there are still some vacant houses on the island, so there is no need to worry about the housing problem. Ninth, if relatives outside want to enter the island, they must be observed in the isolation area for a few days to ensure that they are in good health and have not been infected with the zombie virus. 10th, although the diesel generator can still be used, considering the importance of diesel for future sea fishing, we have decided not to use electricity in our daily lives. The diesel from each household will also be collected and stored together for emergency use. 11th, there is no major problem with the freshwater resources. There is an independent spring on the island, from which groundwater can be obtained. Currently, there are 61 people on the small island, and we have assigned clear tasks to almost everyone. Although the number of people is not large, in this difficult situation, everyone is still united as one. During the discussion, someone worriedly mentioned their relatives who were working or studying outside. They had not returned yet, which made everyone present fall into deep thought. There was a sense of helplessness and worry in the air. Everyone sighed, but no one could give a definite answer. Yes, what else could we do? At such a moment, we could only choose to resign ourselves to fate. Do our best to survive, because only by surviving could there be hope of reunion. After the meeting, Dylan left my father and me alone and asked me about ways to deal with zombies. I recalled the descriptions in the novels and told him all the characteristics of zombies that I knew. The fatal weakness of zombies is their heads. Only by shooting them in the head can they be truly killed. Fire can also effectively deal with zombies, and zombies have a certain tolerance to low temperatures. Although low temperatures cannot completely kill them, they can significantly reduce their activity speed. In addition, they are extremely sensitive to sound. I explained in detail, hoping that this information would be helpful for our survival. After listening to my description, Dylan pondered for a while and then turned to my father and said, "Eli, we must consider the food problem on the island. I will find a way to deal with the zombies at the sluice gate. But now the more important thing is to solve everyone's eating problem. Our food reserves on the island are limited. If we can't use the resources in the sea, our survival will be in trouble sooner or later." My father quickly responded, "Dylan, although I don't yet know the specific situation in the sea and don't dare to go into the water easily, I can try fishing on the cliff. This can also be a preliminary experiment." Dylan nodded in agreement. "Eli, your fishing skills are the best. Be careful and pay attention to safety. As for the zombies at the sluice gate, I still need to think carefully. After all, we knew nothing about zombies before. I have to come up with a safe and effective way to clear them." The next day, everyone got busy according to their divisions of labor. My task was to gather the children together every day and lead them to feed the chickens, rabbits, and other poultry and small animals. This job wasn't actually very onerous. The important thing was to keep the children together, prevent them from disturbing the other busy adults, and also prevent them from running around. In addition, I also had an important mission to assist Aunt Willow in hatching chicks and breeding rabbits. The children were very curious about this work and were happy to participate, so I became the full-time breeder for these children, leading them to learn from Aunt Willow and strive to breed our poultry and small animals. To enrich our food sources, at least currently, the hens have started laying eggs. Although the number of rabbits is still small, we hope to let them reproduce as soon as possible, so we still don't dare to eat them easily. However, their reproduction speed is very fast, and we plan to increase the breeding efforts. If we ignore the doomsday environment outside and only see me leading the children to be busy with laughter and joy, one might mistakenly think that time is still passing quietly and peacefully. At the same time, I would often turn on the hand-cranked radio, trying to find a broadcast signal, but unfortunately, I never received any. Just like this, a peaceful week passed. My father could catch a lot of fish every day. We fed these fish to the puppies, chicks, and rabbits in the cages and observed their reactions. To our relief, after eating these fish, None of the small animals showed any signs of mutation. This initially proved that it was safe to eat these fish, and everyone finally felt at ease. The safety of consuming seafood was confirmed, which ensured the livelihoods of the fishermen, and the food problem was effectively solved. Of course, my job as a breeder still had to continue. After a while, a huge fire broke out in the direction of the sluice gate, and the shrill roars of the zombies also sounded. It turned out that Dylan discovered that zombies were sensitive to sound and especially sensitive to the smell of blood. He cleverly used the weaknesses of the zombies to lure them to gather near the sluice gate and then lit a fire. The raging fire quickly spread and surrounded the zombies. The roars of the zombies didn't attract new zombies either. Dylan was really amazing. He successfully cleared the zombies gathered outside the sluice gate. Now the threat on the small island has been eliminated, and our diet problem has also been solved. My father also tried feeding the seafood from the cages to the small animals in the isolation area, and the result proved that it was okay to eat. This made everyone completely at ease. We no longer had to worry about the basic source of food. However, even in such a situation, Dylan still discussed with everyone and decided to make a large amount of seafood into dried goods for storage, in case new changes might occur in the future. In this way, we can face the future more at ease. But I felt that Dylan's expression was becoming more and more solemn. He called my father over to discuss things frequently these nights. Sure enough, the quiet days didn't last long. Unexpected guests suddenly arrived, breaking the original peace of the island. 10. I stood on the shore of Dapan Island, staring at the sea in the distance. Looking across the sparkling sea, I saw a ship slowly approaching in the distance. The sunlight shone on the ship's hull, reflecting a dazzling light. My attention was completely attracted by the slowly approaching passenger ship. The low-pitched rumble of the engine echoed on the sea, breaking the surrounding tranquility. The people on the ship seemed completely unaware of the impending disaster. Suddenly, the sea surface began to churn, and a group of dolphins broke through the waves. But their appearance was terrifying. Their skin was festered, and their eyes were empty. They were zombie dolphins. They were not as lively and agile as normal dolphins. Instead, they swam around the passenger ship at an astonishing speed, sometimes leaping out of the water and revealing their ferocious faces. The people on the ship were panicked by this sudden and terrifying scene. Gunshots and explosions rang out one after another as they engaged in a life and death struggle with the zombie dolphins. Every time a dolphin rammed into the ship, the hull shook violently, as if it might capsize at any moment. After a fierce battle, the people finally eliminated this group of crazy zombie dolphins. The sea surface returned to calm, and the people on the ship heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that the danger had passed. However, just as they let down their guard, an even more terrifying figure quietly emerged. I widened my eyes, looking at this creature that seemed to have crawled out of the abyss of hell. It was a huge zombie whale. Its body was several times larger than an ordinary whale. Its skin was festered, revealing its white bones. The zombie whale opened its huge mouthparts and let out a deafening roar, as if it was going to swallow everything. Its cloudy eyes flickered with a faint blue fire, and it surged forward through the waves on the sea surface, aiming directly at the passenger ship. The ship also seemed to sense the approach of the zombie whale and began to turn to avoid the attack. But the zombie whale was extremely fast and quickly closed in on the ship. Just then, the zombie whale launched an attack. It suddenly leaped out of the water, and its huge body rushed towards the passenger ship. The people on the ship were in a panic, and screams filled the air. The captain was obviously an experienced person. He quickly maneuvered the ship, trying to avoid the attack of the zombie whale. However, this zombie whale was extremely cunning. It launched another attack, directly ramming into the side of the passenger ship. The ship shook violently, and people were thrown off balance. In complete chaos, I saw someone take out a gun and shoot frantically at the zombie whale, but those bullets seemed to have no effect on it. The zombie whale leaped again. This time, its target was even more clear. It directly rammed into the bridge of the passenger ship. The captain turned the rudder urgently, trying to avoid it, but it was already too late. With a loud bang, the head of the zombie whale directly hit the ship's hull, and instantly, a large hole was made in the ship's hull. The people on the ship were even more panicked. They fled in all directions, trying to find a way to escape, and the zombie whale didn't seem to intend to stop there. It continued to launch fierce attacks. Gunshots and explosions rang out one after another. The zombie whale didn't seem to be afraid of these attacks and continued to attack the ship crazily. Every collision made the ship shake violently, as if it might capsize at any moment. Just then, I saw several people on the ship take out explosive packs and throw them into the huge mouth of the zombie whale. With a loud bang, the explosive packs exploded, and the zombie whale was blown to pieces. The sea surface suddenly returned to calm. The intense battle sounds from before had disappeared. At this moment, only the damaged and precarious passenger ship was left floating alone on the sea surface, slowly approaching Dapan Island. I was about to rush to inform Dylan of this thrilling situation when, unexpectedly, I turned around and directly bumped into my father. Only then did I realize that the deafening gunshots and explosions had already alerted everyone, and people had gathered on the shore. Witnessing that thrilling scene, Dylan took a deep breath and said with emotion, "Look at them, they are all equipped with weapons. These guys are definitely not ordinary people." Then he quickly made a decision and continued. "The women and children stay on the island and don't come out. The rest of you, take your weapons and follow me to the sluice gate to find out the situation." 11. Without Dylan's permission, I secretly followed everyone in a hurry towards the sluice gate. Gunshots and screams of the crowd could already be heard from the direction of the sluice gate. Before we reached the sluice gate, we saw the people on the ship rushing onto the pier and fleeing towards the sluice gate in a panic. Behind them, a group of fierce sea beasts were in hot pursuit, including sea lions, sea dogs, and even dolphins that were washed up on the pier by the waves. The situation was extremely dangerous, but these creatures were no longer what we were familiar with. Their appearance had become extremely terrifying. Their skin was festered, their eyes were blood red, and they showed long fangs, exuding a stinking smell all over their bodies. One of the sea lions had half of its face rotted away, revealing its white bones, and the belly of a sea dog was torn open, with its internal organs almost dragging on the ground. All these sea beasts had become zombified. Not only were they disgusting and terrifying in appearance, but they were also more ferocious in behavior, crazily attacking everything that moved. As the crowd got closer to the sluice gate, they shouted eagerly at us, "Open the gate quickly." However, Dylan remained unmoved. He coldly watched the chaotic scene below, with no change in his expression. The leader-like person in that group glared and roared, "What the hell are you looking at? Open the gate quickly." Dylan took a deep breath and said calmly, "You have so many weapons. First, kill those zombies." The leader still wanted to curse at Dylan, but was stopped by a woman beside him. "Don't waste time on that. First, get rid of these zombies." I couldn't help but feel extremely anxious. The group of people in front of me was large in number and fully armed. Fortunately, they didn't attack us. They frantically shot at those zombie sea beasts, trying to resist this terrifying offensive. The zombie sea beasts didn't seem to be afraid of the gunfire. They swarmed towards the crowd one after another, and every collision made this group of people tremble with fear. Bloody and cruel scenes were common during the fierce battle. Suddenly, a zombie dolphin was washed up on the pier by the waves, and a person was knocked down by it before he could avoid it. The dolphin opened its huge mouth and bit hard at the person's neck. The person next to him was quick-witted and shot the fallen companion in the head with a gun, and at the same time, also killed the zombie dolphin. These people were extremely ruthless. They had no scruples about attacking their own companions. "We have the ability to deal with these zombies," the leader continued to shout at Dylan, "but we need a safe place to rest. Let us in quickly." A glimmer of hesitation flashed in Dylan's eyes, but he still firmly shook his head. "I can't take the risk. You first kill the zombies, and then we can discuss how to enter the island." This group of people showed astonishing combat power under the siege of the zombie sea beasts. They used various weapons to shoot and hack at those zombie sea beasts crazily. Every battle was accompanied by bloodshed and screams, but they were also fearless, fighting for survival. However, Dylan still remained silent and calm, forming a sharp contrast with the scene. He seemed to have become an onlooker, quietly watching this life and death struggle. After a fierce battle, this group of people finally eliminated the zombie sea beasts that attacked them, but the losses were extremely heavy. Looking at the corpses all over the ground and their wounded companions, there was deep grief and anger in their eyes, and this anger was about to be vented on Dylan. However, whether it was angry curses or earnest pleas, Dylan remained unmoved and firmly refused to open the sluice gate to let them enter the island. This was no longer just Dylan's decision. It was the inner consensus reached by several islanders present, because after that fierce battle ended, this group of people strictly checked every injured companion. They were cold-blooded and decisive. As long as it was determined that someone was injured by those zombie sea beasts, they would not hesitate to shoot them in the head. Dylan was not afraid of them. After all, we had the terrain advantage, and the sluice gate was our powerful barrier. Nevertheless, Dylan finally agreed to provide them with some necessary fresh water and food and temporarily allowed them to rest and reorganize in the pier area. For several days, there was peace. We regularly sent food and drinking water to this group of outsiders. From their tired state, it was not difficult to see that they had experienced a lot of hardships during this period. They didn't ask to open the sluice gate and enter the island again, however. Considering that these people had gone through countless battles in the doomsday environment, would they really be satisfied with this and not make any more demands? 12. During this period, Dylan and my father had never shown up. I didn't know what they were busy with. After witnessing the horror of those zombie creatures, the islanders were also filled with panic. For safety reasons, we quickly built a second-line defense inside the island. We isolated and strengthened the previously prepared isolation rooms from the daily living area, dividing it into two independent areas, the isolation zone and the living area. Although the defensive ability of the isolation zone couldn't compare with that of the sluice gate, in case of an accident, it could still play a certain blocking role. After several days, that group of outsiders had recovered their strength, and the look of fatigue on their faces had disappeared. But they were surprisingly quiet now and didn't mention entering the island again. Dylan had been personally delivering water and food to these people these days and also secretly observing their actions. To ensure safety, he increased the number of guards, strictly keeping watch at the sluice gate at night and closely monitoring this group of people. However, one night, there was a huge explosion again from the direction of the sluice gate. Gunshots rang out, piercing the stillness of the night. The sudden explosion jolted me awake from my sleep, my heart skipped a beat, and I immediately realized that something must have happened at the sluice gate. These days, my father had repeatedly told my mother and me that once we heard an explosion or gunshots, we should immediately hide in the cellar and not come out until it was safe. I knew very well that this was the group of outsiders from outside the island finally making a move. However, after settling my mother down, I didn't fully follow my father's instructions. I thought that if these outsiders really broke in, hiding in the cellar would only be a temporary measure of safety, and we would be discovered sooner or later. So, I decided to fight them. I rushed to the sluice gate in a hurry and saw that the originally sturdy sluice gate had been blown open with a gap by this group of outsiders using explosives. The uncles on guard had fallen in a pool of blood, and their lives were uncertain. Anger and fear welled up inside me, but I knew that I had to stay calm at this moment. The islanders didn't have guns. The only thing we could rely on was the terrain advantage. Although the sluice gate had been blown open with a gap, the narrow passage still restricted the attack of the outsiders. The islanders quickly organized a counterattack and used the stones prepared on the high ground to smash down fiercely. They had guns, while the uncles used stones. This was also a form of resistance we carried out by taking advantage of the terrain. Although we were far inferior to that group of outsiders in terms of firepower, with the help of the terrain and the heroic resistance of the islanders, we didn't let this group of outsiders break into the island easily. The gunshots and screams intertwined in the night sky, forming a tragic battle scene. Just then, Dylan appeared. He was holding an explosive pack carefully made with black gunpowder in his hand. He decisively chose to ignite the explosive pack on the cliff above the sluice gate. Immediately, another huge explosion shattered the night sky. Many large stones were blown down, causing several outsiders to be crushed to death or injured. This intense battle lasted for about an hour before gradually subsiding. It wasn't because we had successfully resisted these outsiders. It was because a group of unexpected reinforcements had arrived. That was the zombie horde we didn't want to see. The continuous and loud noise had successfully attracted the zombie tide. 13. The seawater at the pier suddenly turned violently, as if there was some huge monster stirring underneath, and at the same time, a terrifying roar was heard, which made people's hair stand on end. At this time, a large wave of zombie creatures was attracted by the continuous explosions and gunshots. They roared and rushed towards the pier frantically, as if they wanted to devour everything, facing this sudden zombie tide. That group of outsiders was obviously caught off guard. They were in a flurry, panicked and at a loss. However, something even more shocking happened. Among this zombie tide, there were actually zombie people mixed in. The appearance of these zombie people was even more terrifying than that of ordinary zombies. Their rotting faces revealed long fangs, and their whole bodies exuded a disgusting stench. They were not only agile in movement but also had astonishing attack power, posing a huge threat to the outsiders. This sudden change completely threw the outsiders into a panic. They had originally planned to enter the island through the sluice gate, but now the passage of the sluice gate had been completely blocked by the fallen huge stones and couldn't be passed through easily. In such a difficult situation, they had to give up the plan of climbing over the sluice gate and instead focus on dealing with these zombies. However, this time, the number of zombies was much higher than the previous time, and the appearance of the zombie people made the battle even more difficult. They fought desperately, but the zombies seemed to be endless, constantly surging forward. The gunshots, screams, and roars intertwined, forming a tragic picture. We islanders stood on the high ground and witnessed this thrilling battle, our hearts filled with fear and shock, and we would inevitably be involved in it. Dylan decisively commanded some of the islanders to go to the isolation zone, spread flammable materials, and completely seal the road from the isolation zone to the living area to prevent the zombies from breaking in. However, the future outcome was still full of uncertainty. We didn't participate in the intense battle below but were busy reinforcing the isolation zone, doing our best to prevent the zombies from breaking through the isolation zone. Because the number of zombies this time was truly astonishing, and we were worried that the sluice gate might not be able to hold up, the outsiders suffered heavy losses. Although they had eliminated a large number of zombies, there were still an endless stream of zombie creatures coming ashore and rushing towards the sluice gate. It was as if they had fallen into a vicious cycle. Zombies were extremely sensitive to sound, but in order to fight against them, It was necessary to keep shooting and using explosives. Unfortunately, the sound at night traveled far, which undoubtedly attracted more zombies. The zombies piled up in mountains, and the situation became more and more severe. At this time, only the leader and a woman were left among the outsiders. They were covered in blood but still persisted in the battle. The woman pleaded with Dylan for help. "Please save us." But how could we save them? The villagers also didn't have weapons. In the face of the overwhelming tide of zombies, the islanders were also just waiting to die sooner or later. The leader also shouted loudly, "Uncle, I know I've done a lot of evil in this doomsday, but now please save her. She is a kind woman. In this chaotic era, she has always maintained her conscience and has never hurt anyone. She is not like us, stained with sin and blood. I beg you, give her a chance to live." The leader's words were full of sincerity and remorse. And there was deep love for the woman in his eyes. He went crazy in the zombies. He desperately shot at the zombies to buy time for the woman. While shooting, he pushed the woman towards the sluice gate. Regardless of the woman's opposition and struggle, the man lifted her up and shouted towards the sluice gate, "Uncle, save her. She alone can't threaten your island." The words "she alone can't threaten the island" touched Dylan's heart. He looked at the woman's helpless and frightened eyes and the leader's almost crazy plea. Finally, he softened his heart. Dylan quickly threw down a rope and shouted, "Quick, grab the rope." With Dylan's help, the woman was finally pulled up to the high ground. She collapsed on the ground, tearfully thanking Dylan, and the leader, after confirming that the woman was safe, also showed a relieved smile. After the woman went up, she couldn't stop crying. When we wanted to save the leader again, it was already too late. The leader finally looked at the woman, smiled, and shouted, "Live well." Then he rushed towards the zombie horde and detonated the explosives on his body. With a huge explosion, many zombies were blown to pieces, and the sluice gate was damaged again. Slowly, some zombies began to rush through the sluice gate. At first, the woman could still use a gun to shoot and try to stop them, but the number of zombies was too large, and her efforts were in vain. Seeing this, Dylan quickly called on everyone to use stones to smash at the zombies. However, even so, a large number of zombies broke through the sluice gate and poured into the isolation zone. In this critical moment, Dylan suddenly asked everyone to stop the attack, stay quiet, and not make any sound. As the gunshots and explosions gradually subsided, the zombies that rushed in also began to change. They gradually changed from their initial crazy state to a state of sluggishness and confusion. As if they had lost their clear targets, these zombies began to slowly gather near the isolation zone. I was so scared that I didn't dare to breathe loudly or make any sound. I watched these zombies in fear. Dylan quietly stared at the zombies gathered in the isolation zone from the high ground. He waited patiently, and time seemed to stand still at this moment. Only a continuous stream of zombies slowly poured into the isolation zone. Gradually, the number of zombies at the sluice gate became fewer and fewer, and most of the zombies had already entered the isolation zone. There were no new zombies emerging from the sea either. The seawater gradually returned to calm. Dylan waited for a long time until he was sure that most of the zombies had entered the isolation zone. He carefully bypassed the other islanders, came to the isolation wall alone. He lit a torch, held it tightly in his hand, and then suddenly threw it into the isolation zone. The torch fell on the flammable materials that had been spread before, instantly igniting a raging fire. The fire shot up into the sky, illuminating the entire night sky. In the light of the fire, the miserable state of the zombies was revealed. Their skin quickly burned and charred in the fire, emitting a disgusting burnt smell. Some zombies struggled painfully in the fire, letting out shrill roars, which made people's hair stand on end, and what was even more terrifying was that the zombies hurt each other in the fire. They scratched and bit each other in the chaos. Some zombies were even bitten off their limbs or heads by their companions. Some zombies also seemed to be trying to escape from the isolation zone, but they were blocked by the high wall in front and the rock walls on both sides. The entire isolation zone became a sea of fire and a purgatory. The roars and miserable conditions of the zombies were unbearable to look at. Dylan looked at all this, with no expression on his face. The firelight shone on his face, and his eyes were firm and cold. Dylan climbed to a high place again to observe the pier. Only when he didn't find any new zombies emerging from the sea did he feel relieved. No one dared to leave. We just watched the fire burn and closely observed the situation below in case of any unexpected events. This fire continued until dawn, until all the zombies were turned into ashes. 14. There were still some sporadic zombies lingering around the sluice gate and the pier. Dylan led several people. They held tools such as fishforks and carefully approached and eliminated these zombies one by one, successfully ensuring the safety of the island. After cleaning up the zombies, my father led a group of people to clean up the rubble on the island and the charred zombie corpses. At the same time, they started to repair the damaged sluice gate to ensure that the island's defense facilities could return to normal as soon as possible. During this period, we also conducted a detailed interrogation of this outsider woman. Her name was Evelyn, and she was a postgraduate student at XX Harbor University. When my father heard XX Harbor University, he was excited and a little anxious. He quickly asked her if she knew Travis. However, the result was disappointing. Evelyn didn't know my brother Travis, which made us worried that my brother might be in great danger. Harbor University was located in a big city with frequent international traffic. Although the power and other infrastructure were damaged during the Great Power Outage, the international flights were the first to be restored. However, precisely because of the restoration of international flights, the virus also broke out there first and then spread to Harbor University. Now it has become a living hell there. During the escape, Evelyn and her boyfriend joined an armed organization. Because of their ruthless actions, her boyfriend finally became the leader of this organization. They went to sea to look for a livable island but didn't expect that the marine creatures had also turned into zombies. This was roughly the experience of Evelyn's group. Dylan didn't ask Evelyn too many questions, but his attitude towards Evelyn was quite good. Since this group of people came to Dapan Island, Dylan had been observing them. The fact that he was able to save Evelyn surely meant that he had discovered something during his observation. Maybe this woman really hadn't killed any living people and still retained her humanity. In the Doomsday, it was particularly precious to retain humanity. With her professional background in botany, Evelyn successfully helped the island grow corn and a variety of vegetables. She opposed the proposal to grow wheat on the island because she believed that the soil and environmental conditions here were not suitable for wheat growth. Most importantly, she taught everyone how to save seeds, store seeds, and so on. As time passed, Evelyn's professional knowledge and hard work were gradually recognized by everyone, and she was completely accepted by everyone. The days gradually returned to calm. At least everyone was still safe living on the island. My father carried out several more verifications and found that the products from the cage aquaculture really didn't have an impact on the chicks, puppies, and rabbits. Then Evelyn came to a conclusion that shocked us. This time, the virus might only infect mammals. Mammals such as whales, dolphins, sea lions, and sea dogs, like humans, were easily infected with the virus. This might explain why the zombies on land were so difficult to prevent. Rats were also mammals, and they could carry the virus and spread it everywhere. Fortunately, there were no signs of rats on Dapan Island, and the island still remained isolated from the outside world. I used the radio to receive information every day but still didn't receive any news. I was immersed in my own joy because I had not only successfully hatched chicks, but also the rabbit breeding had changed from initial failure to several consecutive successful batches under Evelyn's guidance. We also had a harvest of corn. In addition to the sources of meat such as seafood, chicks, and rabbits, we now also had the staple food of corn as an important grain. The harvest of corn meant that we had completely achieved self-sufficiency. The days passed easily and comfortably. In her spare time, Evelyn would also give classes to me and the children, teaching human civilization and knowledge. The main courses we studied were from the 3 books provided by Dylan: Friend of Military and Civilian Talents, Handbook of Barefoot Doctors, and Handbook of Militia Military Training. Although Evelyn was a little disdainful of the books brought by Dylan at first, she showed great respect after flipping through them. We firmly believed that as long as the spark of civilization was passed on, the dawn of hope would never be extinguished. After another period of time, a pregnant woman on the island gave birth to a baby girl. Her arrival brought new hope and vitality to the whole island. Everyone named her Aurora. It represented a new beginning in the morning, implying that this baby girl symbolized new hope and a new start. We hoped that the birth of this baby girl could bring joy and a sense of happiness to people. At the same time, we also expected that she could maintain an optimistic and cheerful attitude in the face of adversity and bravely face future challenges. Epilogue 1. With the birth of Aurora. These days, for the first time, I heard a voice from the radio. Dear fellow citizens, our country has successfully stopped the crazy spread of the zombie virus. A safe city has been established in XX. Now, the country is going all out with the rescue work. Every fellow citizen who has survived this disaster is a treasure of the country, and we will never give up on anyone. Survivors in the SS area, try to leave your information in an obvious place to facilitate the rescue team's search and rescue. For example, light a firework, wave a flag, but avoid making a huge noise because zombies are sensitive to sound. Our rescue team is on the way. They will do everything they can to find you and take you home. This virus can infect all known mammals, and the main route of infection is body fluids, such as saliva and blood. Avoid being bitten or scratched, and avoid coming into contact with the blood of mammals. Those who are bitten will turn into zombies within 1 hour, and those who are scratched will turn into zombies within 72 hours. Mammals can carry the virus. The virus can survive for 1 hour at a temperature of 60 degrees Celsius and for 10 seconds at a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius. In addition, after the virus leaves the mammalian host, its survival time usually does not exceed 5 minutes. Therefore, when dealing with food, It must be fully heated to kill any possible virus and avoid the food carrying the virus. The anti-venom serum has entered the clinical trial stage, which is an inspiring piece of news. Injecting the serum urgently before turning into a zombie can successfully prevent the transformation. Please everyone continue to stay vigilant and take protective measures, but more importantly, please maintain confidence. Believe in the country, and believe that we will definitely overcome this disaster. Fellow citizens, this is a battle between life and death, but we have never backed down. Every tribulation has made us stronger, and every tear has made us cherish life more. Please believe that the country will not give up on you, and we will not give up on each other. Hold on, stay alive, and wait for our rescue. Let's welcome that brand new and hopeful tomorrow together. Wait for us to take you home. The area where Japan Island is located is within the SS area. Dylan lit a beacon fire at the highest point of the island, waiting to go home, the new home built for us by the country. Epilogue 2. At the end of World War II, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, bringing great pain and disaster to the Japanese people, but at the same time, it also accelerated the end of the war, after the appearance of the zombie virus. Some people began to think that if a large-scale nuclear strike was carried out in the areas severely affected by the zombie virus, it might be able to completely eliminate the source of the virus. However, this idea was quickly opposed. The first reason was that the use of nuclear weapons would cause extremely serious damage to the environment. Radioactive contamination would make large areas of land uninhabitable for a long time, and the ecological system would be severely disrupted. Even if the zombies were eliminated, the subsequent environmental problems would make it difficult for humans to survive. Secondly, the zombie virus had already spread widely, and it was difficult to determine the exact scope of its spread. A nuclear strike might not be able to completely eliminate all the zombies, but instead, it would cause a large number of innocent people who had not been infected to be affected, which was contrary to the purpose of saving lives. In addition, the use of nuclear weapons would also bring about a series of political and diplomatic problems. In the context of the global zombie crisis, countries needed to work together to deal with it, rather than using extreme means that would cause more harm. So, in the end, the international community reached a consensus that they would rely on scientific research and technological means to develop antivirus serums and other effective methods to deal with the zombie virus. They would also strengthen cooperation and communication to jointly maintain social order and the safety of people's lives. As for Japan Island, with the appearance of the rescue signal on the radio, everyone on the island was full of hope. They began to make preparations for leaving the island. Evelyn used her knowledge to collect various plants on the island that might have medicinal value, hoping to contribute to the treatment of the zombie virus in the future. My father and the other fishermen carefully cleaned and maintained the fishing boats, in case they could be used during the rescue process. I, together with the children, made some simple signs and flags, which were used to attract the attention of the rescue team. We also prepared some food and water to ensure that we had enough energy during the waiting and rescue process. During this period, we also began to sort out the experience and lessons of our survival on the island. We hoped that these experiences could help other survivors, for example, how to make full use of limited resources, how to build effective defenses, and how to deal with the threat of zombies. Finally, on a sunny morning, we saw a large rescue aircraft flying over the island. Everyone on the island cheered and waved their flags frantically. We knew that our long-awaited rescue had finally arrived. The rescue team landed on the island smoothly. They first carried out a comprehensive inspection of everyone on the island to ensure that no one was infected with the zombie virus. Then, they helped us pack our belongings and boarded the aircraft one by one. When the aircraft took off, I looked back at Japan Island, which had been our home for so long. Although there were many hardships and dangers here, it also carried our memories and hopes. I believed that in the future, we would build a better home after arriving at the safe city. We were warmly received. The government provided us with comfortable accommodation, delicious food, and comprehensive medical care. We also met many other survivors, and we shared our stories and experiences with each other. In the following days, I decided to continue my studies and hope to use my knowledge to contribute to the reconstruction of society. My father also planned to participate in the work of restoring the fishing industry, hoping to provide more food for everyone. Evelyn joined a scientific research team, and she was committed to studying the zombie virus and developing more effective treatment methods. Although the shadow of the zombie virus still lingered in our hearts, we believed that with the joint efforts of everyone, we would be able to overcome this disaster and welcome a new and beautiful future, and the story of Japan Island would also become a precious memory in our lives, reminding us to cherish life and be brave in the face of difficulties. Years passed, and the world gradually returned to normal. The antivirus serum had been successfully developed and widely used, completely eradicating the threat of the zombie virus. People rebuilt their homes, and cities once again became prosperous. I had grown up and became a teacher. I taught the younger generation about the history of this disaster, hoping that they could learn lessons from it and cherish the hard-won peace and stability. And I also firmly believed that as long as humanity was united and full of hope, no difficulty could stop our progress. Story 2. In my past life, when the zombie outbreak occurred, our farm had everything we needed to survive, and my kind husband took in my aunt's family. When the harsh winter came, they deliberately damaged the furnace to draw others away and let zombies in to bite me to death. My disabled husband was also thrown out to freeze to death, reborn a month before the apocalypse. I decided to seal off the farm and not let anyone else in. While others were escaping from zombies, I was drawing them to my door to serve as my free bodyguards. My husband became disabled in both legs due to a car accident. To take care of him, I quit my job and started a social media career, gradually becoming a minor internet celebrity. With the money earned, I transformed our old homeland into an ecological farm. The farm, though only 80 acres, was designed by me to be naturally elegant. After 5 years of operation, the farm developed well, and I expanded it by adding a convenience store, parking lot, barbecue area, fishing area, and goose houses. Spring was for flower viewing and fall for fruit picking, attracting many visitors. Now in April, as the flowers fade and the farm enters the off-season, I was planning to build an ecological restaurant to boost visitor numbers during these slower months. But this morning, amidst everyone's confusion, I pulled all farm products off the shelves, deleted all promotional videos, and halted the restaurant construction, directing workers instead to build a basement. The reason: I had been reborn, the apocalypse was near, and money had to be spent wisely. In my previous life, during a promotion on May 20th at the farm, a national zombie outbreak occurred, trapping some visitors. A group of about 20 of us teamed up to hunt zombies. Later, a cold wave swept over the land, making food regrowth impossible and turning people's hearts dark. Betrayal ensued, and everyone was wiped out. Having returned, I chose to look after myself. The farm, built against a mountain, had all necessary emergency supplies and food, so there was no need for large-scale stockpiling. I just needed to finish the basement and seal the farm. I calculated the costs for the farm modifications. I had over $2 million in cash but needed about $2 million more. Close to mealtime, Kaya and Carrie, as usual, came strolling over with their hands behind their backs. The farm had been running for 5 years, and I never minded them freeloading, but now seeing them stirred hatred within me. I clenched my fist into my arm to calm myself. In my past life, Kaya's family, under Betsy's instigation, had sabotaged the ventilation ducts to lure others outside for repairs, then locked the door, resulting in everyone freezing to death. Only Brian, who was disabled, and I, who was unconscious, were left in the guesthouse lounge. Brian yelled at me to run, but as soon as I opened my eyes, 2 zombies pounced on me, tearing me apart, while Kaya's family and Betsy watched indifferently from behind the safety door of the staircase. Betsy revealed that 2 months into the zombie outbreak, she had gotten the night watchman drunk, opened the doors and windows, and let zombies in to kill little Bob. We all thought it was an accident at the time, Betsy arrogantly declared. In the apocalypse, the saints die first, and the disabled are not spared, but we were humans, not NPCs in her apocalyptic game. Could simply being labeled as saints or useless justify random slaughter? Betsy then shot the zombies dead. After Kaya's family threw us out, Brian kept shouting for his aunt and uncle, trying to evoke a final shred of kinship from them. Casper slapped Brian across the face. Why won't you just die? You should have been dead long ago. The old homestead, this farm, it should all be mine. All the money should be mine. That was when I realized that Casper had been coveting Brian's family's fortune for a long time. We were cast out into the snowy landscape, surrounded by teammates frozen into ice sculptures. We, who had shared life and death, were utterly defeated by the betrayal of our own. I tilted my head back to force back the tears and turned away to hide my hatred. What are you doing? Digging a foundation just to fill it in again. Have you got money to burn? Kaya's nagging voice echoed around the construction site. After she ranted for a while and saw that I was ignoring her, Kaya grabbed a shovel from one of the workers, pointed at them and asked, "Are you deaf?" Unable to endure her indirect insults, I raised my voice and asked, "What are you doing?" Casper, hands behind his back, said with a look of disappointment, "Isn't it supposed to be a restaurant? Digging a foundation only to fill it back in, what a waste of labor costs." "It's none of your business," I snapped back unapologetically. I'm usually amicable, but this was the first time I had retorted so sharply, causing both of them to flush red and then pale. Kaya pointed the shovel at me. "May, how dare you speak to your elders like that? And after we came here to help you." I laughed. "Oh, so Auntie came to help me work. How could Uncle just stand there doing nothing?" I pointed at a wheelbarrow nearby. "Go move some soil," Casper, with his hands in his pockets, mockingly said. "Oh, the great internet celebrity, now bossing around her elders." From a distance, little Bob pushed Brian towards us. I loudly said, "If you don't want to work, just leave. Am I forcing you? Why the need to shout?" Kaya, furious, her face ashen, said, "This is our land, our farm. How dare you try to drive me away from my own home?" Little Bob said, "Big sister didn't say anything about driving you away, little Bob." who usually had his heads down and didn't make eye contact, now summoned the courage to speak up. If you're just here to freeload, go ahead, the farm can support one more mouth. You said you came to help, but all you do is argue with Big Sister, I scoffed. Little Bob, without regard for right or wrong, staunchly took my side. Kaya lunged to hit Little Bob. Who taught you to talk to your aunt like that? I quickly said. Try touching him and see. Brian raised his hand to protect Little Bob behind him. Casper, still somewhat sensible, knew they weren't welcome at the farm today and forcibly dragged Kaya away. Kaya kept looking back at Brian, thinking he would mediate, but Brian, with a stern face, watched as Kaya was pulled away without saying a word. Driving those two away didn't bring me much relief. No matter how troublesome Kaya was, when the end of days arrived, Brian would still take her in. I had to eliminate this risk. Kaya's son, Carl, was getting married, and they were looking to buy a matrimonial home. With this in mind, I posted an urgent house sale notice on social media. 3 days ago, Betsy booked the suite on the 4th floor of the guest house in the middle of the farm, which had half a sunroom and half a suite. If nothing unexpected happens, Betsy will arrive at the farm in a Ferrari on April 22nd. The farm is under construction, and I had Aunt Huang contact Betsy to cancel the reservation. Aunt Huang advised me, her family is truly wealthy and influential. We really shouldn't offend them. Let's communicate with her first. Betsy has been coming to the southern farm to escape the summer heat since 3 years ago, not because her family was merely wealthy, but because they were powerful. In my past life, when the zombie outbreak occurred, her mother sent a helicopter to pick her up and take her home. However, she found battling zombies on the farm entertaining and stubbornly chose to stay, even convincing her mom to supply them with a few guns. Even in this post-apocalyptic world, this wealthy darling remained the beloved center of our group. But who would have guessed that beneath her beautiful exterior lay a heart as venomous as a snake's? Soon after, Betsy forwarded me a video of renovation work that Aunt Huang had sent her and confronted me angrily. May, with all that noise and chaos, how can anyone live here? The glass in the guest house is thickened for soundproofing. It's a bit inconvenient, but we'll waive the accommodation fee during the renovation days. Betsy retorted, do you think I care about the room fee? I've already disembarked. Starting construction now is unacceptable. Why don't you come back a few days later? There are other farms in the same city that are dozens of times larger than ours, and their guest houses are much more luxurious. I can book a room for you at any of them if you'd like. After some persuasion, Betsy finally agreed to cancel her booking. I breathed a sigh of relief. As long as she died out there, it was none of my concern. In the afternoon, I went to the city to mortgage the property deed at the bank and secured $200,000. Then I contacted a vehicle loan provider to mortgage the family truck and car, obtaining an additional $300,000. I also scoured various online lending platforms and managed to gather $1.5 million. Effortlessly, I had amassed $2 million, which was sufficient. I ordered 1,000 kilograms of cat litter at the wholesale market, instructing them to deliver it to the farm in 20 days. Back at the farm, amid the clanging and banging of construction, workers busily transported soil and moved bricks. By May 5th, all the construction was completed. The walls were tall and sturdy. The basement, built underneath the guest house, spanned 2 underground levels and was accessible directly by an elevator. It included 2 ventilation systems, and I installed a recirculating furnace on each level, with smoke pipes leading directly outdoors. Most of the money was spent. I withdrew an additional $100,000 or so from Brian's card to replace it with a robust new gate. During dinner, Brian sighed and brought up Kaya. After all, she is our only elder. Despite her temper, she cares about us. She knew we were short on funds for the renovation and was willing to buy our house. I raised an eyebrow at Brian. I want the full payment, though. The house was worth about $1 million in the current market. In a real pinch, a real estate agent could quickly recoup $800,000 to $900,000, but I didn't use an agent, waiting instead for Kaya to take the bait. Kaya and her husband coldly offered $300,000 at most. They clearly didn't want to pay even half. Kaya said, "You're short on money. Your cousin needs a house for his wedding. Let's help each other as relatives." Brian turned pale with anger. No need to discuss further. We can sell the house to someone else. Kaya immediately started crying and accused Brian of lacking familial loyalty. I raised you. Brian slapped his thigh, and, let's not emotionally blackmail each other. Kaya was left speechless, unable to claim the moral high ground, which Brian never relinquished. I somberly added, selling the house to someone else does make a difference. I've already mortgaged the deed. Brian was taken aback and stared at me. Kaya and her husband smugly said, without the ability to transfer ownership. Who besides family would buy it? Brian replied, it's supposed to be our marital home. Let's keep it. I'll ask around with friends to scrape through these couple of months. Kaya immediately became anxious and started crying again. Use this $300,000 to get through this period. Your wife earns good money. What kind of house can't you buy? Do you have the heart to see your brother without even a house to get married in? I reluctantly said, at least $500,000 in cash after all this runaround. My actual intent was just to drain their pockets. Kaya stopped crying at once and said, "If we have to add, we will add, but as the famous influencer you are, you should also give a wedding gift. Consider that as the gift money staying with us." How shameless. There's no way rural wedding gifts come anywhere close to 200,000. Brian slammed the table. That house is worth at least $1 million in the market. The remaining 500,000 will be the gift money. Aren't you satisfied yet? Casper agreed on their behalf and added, "Since the house is worth $1 million, write us an IOU for $1 million. That way, neither side loses if the other backs out." Brian frowned, about to speak, but I stopped him and said, "Okay, I'll give you the keys tomorrow." I immediately wrote an IOU and transferred 500,000 to my card. The IOU was handed to Casper once Kaya and her husband left. The butchers and temporary workers we had asked for from town arrived. I planned to slaughter all the livestock in the breeding area, pigs, cattle, sheep, chickens, ducks, geese, and the big fish from the fish pond, and make cured meats, leaving only some egg-laying chickens, ducks, and a few young piglets and lambs. I drove a small truck with Mimi and 2 workers into the city, dropping them off at the old house to clean up the furniture, while I took Mimi shopping at the mall. I handed Mimi a card and said, "We won't have time to come to the city later. Pick out the snacks you like, as long as you eat them before they expire. Take as much as you can." In my previous life, Mimi died suddenly. I cried to Brian, saying if I had known, I wouldn't have restricted Mimi's snack eating. Now I finally had the chance to make up for that regret. I went to a down jacket brand store to buy thickened winter down jackets. The owner directly took me to the warehouse, and I picked 30 pieces for both men and women. 30 sets of thermal underwear for men and women, and 30 pairs of thick leather boots for each. I also bought 30 extremely thick duck-down quilts and 2 thick and warm mattresses, asking the owner to pack them up to pick up later. At the supermarket entrance, Mimi came out pushing 2 shopping carts full of snacks, followed by a stock clerk with another cart. He called out to me excitedly. A quite spectacular sight. We took a taxi back to the residential area. Mimi said, "People always say sisters-in-law and sisters-in-law naturally don't get along, but I feel like you treat me as kindly as a real sister. Family isn't formed by blood relations alone, but by how we treat each other." As we spoke, we had already arrived at the old apartment building, and the 2 workers had loaded all the furniture into the truck, waiting for us downstairs. "Is everything cleaned up, Sister Nan?" "We've moved everything except the built-in wardrobes and cabinets. We're just about to take up the flooring. We couldn't move everything out too cleanly, in case Kaya's family didn't move in promptly. Leaving things in the village could end up causing trouble. They are relatives after all. Let's leave the flooring for them." The 2 workers chuckled, and I drove the small truck straight to the mall to pick up the clothes and down quilts, then drove to the town. The farm workers were all from the town, so I distributed the old furniture to them, and each person also received 3 sets of thermal clothes, 3 down jackets, 3 pairs of thick boots, and 3 down quilts. Buying winter stuff now is really cheap. Take it home and save it for when it gets cold. The workers hesitated to accept the new clothes, and just then, Casper appeared, hands behind his back, scoffing as he saw us. "Got some nice things there. And you don't even think to honor your elders," I coldly retorted. "I thank those who work for me." The commotion attracted onlookers from the street, and some even took out their phones to record me. I tossed the old house keys to Casper, saying, "I'm selling $1 million house to you for half its price. That's the end of any familial ties. Don't pretend to be my elder in front of me anymore." Casper, with his nose in the air, retorted, "You aren't short of money. You wouldn't sell it for so cheap." Tired of arguing, I instructed the workers to remove the items and gave the unneeded furniture to the neighbors. Realizing the furniture came from the old house, Casper stormed off furiously. Soon after, Kaya came out crying hysterically, exclaiming, "Damn it, you'd rather give it away than leave even a bit for me." From the car, Little Boo urged me, "Let's go, quick." I stepped on the gas, leaving behind Kaya's cries and curses. It was about 3 kilometers from town to the farm, a drive of 5 or 6 minutes. Returning to the farm, Kaya's complaints and curses migrated to Brian's phone, all in 60-second voice messages. She cursed that I would meet a terrible fate and wept about her deceased brother, complaining about how her family mistreated her. I couldn't help but chuckle, while Brian forcefully took back his phone to reply, "We'll give you your money back, and we won't sell the house that way. You won't feel shortchanged." Kaya, gritting her teeth, scolded Brian for being heartless. "Now that you've raised the money, you don't need us anymore. Aren't you afraid of divine retribution?" The next day, the workers shared a laugh about Kaya's family's predicament. They hired a truck overnight to move to the city. Carl even said if you back out, he'd kill you all. Brian, uninterested, wheeled himself off to go fishing. I smirked secretly, glad to have provoked the evil in Kaya's family early in life, wondering how Brian could still feel sympathy for them. With Kaya moving to the city, even if Brian softened at the end of his days, he could do nothing about it. With the outbreak of zombies just days away, I had the workers chop down the tall fruit trees and saw them into firewood, stacking it beside the guest house. On May 17th, I gave the 5 farm workers an extended vacation and paid them 3 months extra salary. I also sent them off with several pounds of fresh and cured meat. After that, I didn't have much need for money. With about 300,000 left on my bank card, I took Little Boo to buy gold bars. I bought 10 gold bars, spending all the money on the card. Enticed by a saleslady's enthusiastic pitch, I took a liking to a gold necklace priced over 10,000. I frowned and said to the necklace, "Actually, I don't even like you that much. Besides, you're really expensive." As Little Boo and I were about to leave, Little Boo took out a bank card from his bag and handed it to the saleslady, saying, "I'll buy it for you. You give me 2,000 a month for spending, and Big Brother gives me a bonus during the new year. But since you buy me everything and won't let me eat snacks, I've saved up." The saleslady warmly placed the necklace around my neck, remarking, "Sister Nan, it's all real in your videos. You and your sister-in-law really do get along well." This scene was captured on someone's phone. I told Little Boo, "Let's use all your money to buy more gold bars." When we returned, we brought back 15 gold bars and a car full of gifts from the jewelry store. Back at the farm, Brian greeted me with a stern face. "You've been cyberbullied." He handed me his phone. 3 days ago, Kaya had posted a video, weeping that I had been ungrateful after borrowing money, and she showed a handwritten IOU of mine. The media sensationalized it with the headline, "Internet celebrity May fails to repay borrowed money, allegedly insults creditor." The accompanying video was of me throwing the keys at Casper, but it was muted. The workers at the farm added, "You offended some by giving away the old furniture. They think since the house was sold to them, the furniture should be theirs too." There was no loan involved at all. "We heard everything clearly that day when you were discussing matters. They actually bought your house for half its price but had you write a receipt for the full amount. We can get the villagers together to make a video to clarify this." I smiled and said, "No need to clarify. Let's keep the farm closed for now. It wouldn't hurt to let Casper and his family jump around a bit." Everyone was puzzled, so I explained, "Notoriety is still a form of fame." I advised everyone, starting tomorrow, I might be subjected to an online backlash, as farm workers. You might be affected too. It might be wise to stock up on essentials and stay indoors." The workers agreed and immediately went to the city to stock up. That evening, a video from the jewelry store was uploaded online. Kaya and her family made a video collectively accusing me of being deceitful, having money but not repaying debts, and even scamming money from little Bob who has cerebral palsy. Numerous marketing accounts began slandering me, and many netizens cursed me for being greedy, even going so far as to scam little Bob's money. Regarding the cyberbullying, I intentionally let it happen to see how Brian would handle it. On the evening of the 19th, Brian, together with little Bob, made a video to clarify things for me and also sent out a legal notice. It turned out that I had indeed spent all the money in their pockets, forcing Brian to take out small loans to buy popularity. The netizens aren't fools. Such obvious slander was easily reversed with our clarification, and within a few hours, my reputation was restored. The fact that Kaya was living in my house was undeniable. Brian showed me his phone, saying, "I've already instructed the lawyer to report this to the police, even if she's my aunt. I won't let her get away with slandering you." I nonchalantly replied, "Just don't go soft when Kaya ends up in jail." I took my phone and went outside to enjoy the cooler evening air, instructing the farm staff in our work group not to leave the house. I also contacted Betsy, telling her there was an event at the farm and it was going to be lively, inviting her to come visit. Betsy agreed. After little Bob and Brian had gone to sleep, I locked the farm gate with an electronic lock and cut the power. On the 20th, Brian woke me up frantically. "May, it's the end of the world. There are zombies outside." The actual end of the world was still far off. Little Bob also burst into our room in a panic, holding his phone. "People are eating each other. Don't panic. The farm has walls. Zombies can't get in." Checking the time on my phone, it was almost noon. After calming them down, I rode my bike to the breeding area to feed the animals and called Betsy, surprisingly getting through. I asked with some disappointment, "Miss Betsy, where are you now? Are you safe?" Betsy casually mentioned she was fine despite the sound of gunfire in the background. "Miss Betsy, there's a zombie virus outbreak. You should head home." Betsy's voice was nonchalant. "Just some biting corpses, right? I've known about it. My mother already arranged protection for me, but many roads are blocked, so I can't make it to the southern farm. The virus takes time to spread," and Betsy was clearly among the first to be informed, yet I didn't expect her to still consider meeting up knowing about the zombies. "Miss Betsy, it's too dangerous. Please be careful." I pretended to cry and then hung up. After feeding the animals and dropping some dog food, I rode back to the guest house for lunch. The whole network was in a state of panic, and the authorities released a zombie survival guide, advising everyone to stay home. The message read, "The people will overcome all hardships." Subsequently, The military was dispatched to deliver food to each community. Everyone is trying to buy more food. Those with money do so easily, while those without resort to borrowing. Kaya's family, whom I've financially exhausted, moved to the city and even borrowed money to buy some furniture. Soon after, penniless, they called Brian for help, immediately accusing, "Your wife swindled our life-saving money. You can't just ignore this." Speechless with anger, Brian responded, "Weren't you the ones eager to buy my house? How can you twist the truth like this? And you still have the nerve to ask for my help?" Casper, furious, shouted, "If it weren't for May's fans cyberbullying us, we wouldn't be in this situation where we can't borrow money. You have to help, whether you like it or not." Carl's girlfriend, in tears, said, "I'm pregnant and starving. I sought help online, but May's fans chased us down with insults. And no one would help us." Brian scoffed. There was money to lend, but to counter the smear campaign, all the money was spent on boosting our online presence. "You've brought this upon yourselves. Even if you starve, there's nothing I can do." He hung up in frustration, and I, standing beside him, smirked. "Are you really going to watch them starve to death?" "They won't starve. The government provides free food," Brian replied. I was taken aback, thinking he had really given up on that family in town. There was talk that a family had turned into zombies and bitten 2 people. The chat group was filled with gloom. I posted, "Everyone, don't panic. According to the zombie handbook, zombies are attracted to sound. I'll play music at the farm to lure them here." Brian added, "Our farm has high walls. It's safer to have the zombies here than wandering outside." The speakers blared energetic DJ music, drawing the zombies towards the farm with their clumsy dance steps. Once the zombies moved, the government quickly barricaded several town roads and broadcasted warnings to stay indoors. Around 11 at night, someone in the chat frantically messaged me and Brian, "Why has the music stopped? How can we sleep peacefully now?" I replied, "We need to sleep too. If you guys make noise, and if zombies enter the village, we're in real danger." They complained. Brian, frustrated, threw his phone. He truly wanted to help everyone, but they didn't care about our well-being. In the chat, I wrote, "Just lock your doors and windows and sleep. If you're so capable, go fight the zombies yourself. Stop barking at me." I put down my phone and slept soundly. Brian took a while to calm down and sleep. The next morning, seeing the phone on the floor, I glanced at Brian, who was still asleep, and stomped the phone to pieces, thinking he had broken it himself. He casually threw it away. When Kaya's call for help came through, I found a quiet spot, sipping coffee as I relished their distress. "May, it's all my mom's fault for slandering you online. Please overlook our petty actions and save us," Kaya pleaded, but I hadn't forgotten how their family had wronged us, contributing to little Brody's death and attempting to kill me and Brian. "Truly, there's no money," I responded. Their actions in inciting netizens against me had backfired, leaving them with no one to turn to for help. Besides, if they hadn't smeared me, Brian would have surely helped them borrow money by now. They had blocked their own path. Kaya said, "We've contacted an old neighbor. If you're willing to give him meat, he'll transfer money to us. The countryside doesn't lack food. It's just that some households don't raise poultry. Their craving for meat is understandable. But do I look that generous?" Seeing my indifferent expression, Kaya knelt down crying, "May, please, our old couple has already suffered the consequences of our misdeeds. And your nephew is innocent. Saving a life brings boundless merit. When this child grows up, let him take care of you in your old age." As Kaya spoke, she slapped her own face, while Casper also knelt down crying and slapped himself hard. Carl and his spouse were cursing on the side. "Our cousin kindly sold us her house, yet you chose to harm people." The whole family was putting on a dramatic show. Fortunately, I had the foresight to smash Brian's phone. If they had tried this act on Brian, he would have softened by now. I had almost enjoyed the show when I said, "To save everyone, I've lured a lot of zombies to the outskirts of the farm. No one can come to fetch the meat now." Carl blurted out, "Why don't you just deliver it?" I smiled and replied, "Why don't you come and get the meat directly? It saves the middleman's markup." Saying this, I flipped the camera to show them the scene of Brian cooking fresh meat hot pot in the courtyard. I hung up the video call and casually started watching short videos, legs crossed. 8 out of 10 videos featured people from Kaiga Farm fighting zombies. Betsy was among them. Their weapons were provided by Betsy. Kaiga Farm covers thousands of acres and shelters hundreds of people. The videos showed everyone deeply grateful to Betsy, but I knew Betsy's cynical nature well. She treated the zombie outbreak like some apocalyptic game. Using a burner account, I messaged Daniel, "Be careful with Betsy, she's no saint." That was the only help I could offer them. 3 days later, the number of infected surged, the nation experienced power and internet outages, and the government's last message announced the blockage of transportation in all towns and villages, preserving uninfected areas. This also meant that heavily infected areas were abandoned. The farm had solar panels and a biogas generator, so essential appliances still had power. I kept my loudspeaker on daily, reminding people in town to venture out in groups during broadcast times to gather fruits and vegetables. More and more zombies gathered outside the walls. One afternoon, hundreds of scattered zombies suddenly congregated near the breeding area, likely attracted by the sounds of small animals. Instinctively climbing, they almost overcame the wall by stacking atop each other. Mimi, wearing pot lids front and back and wielding a kitchen knife, charged fiercely at them. I stopped her and handed her an iron hammer. In her past life, this hammer was Mimi's weapon. Mimi took the hammer, weighing it with satisfaction. I picked up an iron shovel from the corner, my weapon of choice in a past life, which I had sharpened to perfection. Mimi and I stood side by side, Brian, in his wheelchair, silently followed behind. No words were wasted. Facing the zombies was something we had anticipated. A zombie climbed over the 4-meter-high wall and crashed to the ground, its leg bones shattering, but it showed no reaction and staggered towards me with a roar. In Brian's view, I stood motionless until the zombie was close, then I raised my shovel and struck hard at its neck, severing its head. Then 2 more zombies dropped into the farm, charging at Mimi and me. Mimi raised her hammer, and I my shovel, one by one. Zombies' heads were severed or their brains smashed. After about a dozen zombies fell in, Mimi had enough practice. I signaled to Brian, who immediately controlled a drone carrying me to fly out over the wall. Zombies were lured away by the drone, leaving not enough to form a human wall, and thus the crisis was averted. After the battle, Mimi was panting heavily. Brian and I praised her bravery. See, there's nothing to be afraid of with zombies when they come. Just treat them like rabid stray dogs. Mimi grew more confident. Holding her iron hammer, she declared, "From now on, let me handle any zombies that come into the farm." Later, as I burned the battlefield, I found a zombie still moving despite having half its head missing. Brian and Mimi didn't see it. I tied it up in an unused barn, having overcome our fear of zombies. Our life continued much as it had in previous years, though harvesting fruits and vegetables was a bit more tiring. From beyond the walls, the zombies' growls occasionally disturbed us, annoying like the sound of cicadas, but one gets used to it. I watched the zombies on the monitor. Brian lit the fireplace and quietly flipped through a book from the shelf, eventually falling asleep without realizing it. In the early morning, I screamed, waking Brian from his sleep. He opened his eyes to see me being attacked by 2 border collies. I was covered in blood, falling and flailing, with the 2 dogs furiously barking and biting at me. Brian, the dogs are infected. Help me," I cried out. Brian frantically tried to move his wheelchair, but it was locked in place, and he watched me anxiously. Blood poured from my wounds, and despite my efforts to push the dogs away, it was futile. "Brian, save me." In a life-or-death moment, Brian forcefully stood up and began walking towards me. However, he hadn't gone far before he collapsed with a loud thud. "Mimi, come quickly," Brian shouted, dragging himself towards me with all his strength. I released my grip on one of the dogs' heads, and both immediately ran to Brian seeking comfort. Brian looked at me in shock as I pulled out a bag of pig's blood from my clothes and quietly watched him. We lay there, mere feet apart, motionless. You just stood up. In a previous life, during a campfire conversation at the farm, Betsy mentioned that the zombie virus was initially researched for immortality, supposedly to create undying bodies for the wealthy. At that time, there was a doctor in the group who suggested that since the virus could regenerate a zombie's severed leg, there might be hope for Brian's legs. I wasn't there, but Brian volunteered to be the doctor's test subject when he heard there might be a cure. The doctor captured a zombie and injected a small amount of the virus into an adult pig, which quickly died without mutating. He then extracted the virus from the pig and injected it into another animal. After several experiments, a sheep injected with the virus survived for 10 days. The doctor extracted the viral blood and injected it into Brian's spine. For 5 days, Brian showed no reaction, and the doctor wanted to increase the dosage. I found out and strongly opposed it. I disagreed with using Brian's body for experiments. To me, his life was not something to gamble with. Later, as a cold wave swept over the land, Betsy schemed against us, and I saw 2 zombies tearing at my body. I watched as Brian slowly stood up, only to fall heavily back down again. The experiment was successful. When I was thrown into the snow, still barely alive, Brian crawled over me, shielding me tightly beneath his body. He knew I would turn into a zombie. He knew we were both going to die, yet before death, he used all his strength to give me the last warmth of this world, into my body, my heart, and my memory, having been reborn. I built a fortress for the apocalypse and secretly prepared a serum. I remembered every detail of the doctor's experiments, using young pigs and sheep as carriers to ensure Brian's safety. Just like in my previous life, a young lamb survived healthily for more than 10 days. I then extracted serum to inject Brian while he was asleep. Brian showed no reaction, so I had to create a crisis to push him. 3 days later, Brian could get up on his own. I made him a pair of crutches from peach wood. And he spent the whole day doing rehabilitation in the yard, walking back and forth. I had dinner ready, and Brian was still moving around in the yard. Come and eat, take a break. Brian walked very slowly, smiling as he said, apart from being a bit clumsy, I don't feel tired at all, May. I think I can take another shot of the serum, but without experimental data to back it up. Another injection was too risky. Things are already going well. Let's take it slow, Mimi also said. Big brother, you walk like a zombie. Aren't you going to suddenly bite your sister-in-law at night? Brian scolded her. Nonsense. Then added, I was just being impatient. Let's take it slow. I will recover. Half a month later. Brian said goodbye to his crutches. He walked from the guest house to the fishing area, caught a fish, and cooked us dinner. I lay on a lounge chair watching Brian shuffle like an old man, very leisurely. 3 months after the zombie outbreak, Brian's legs had healed. At night, Brian and I lay together on the terrace watching the stars. While the zombies howled disruptively outside, Brian suddenly sat up. Me, aren't zombies just like rabid dogs? We could broadcast a message and rally the villagers to exterminate the zombies once and for all. It's better than everyone being trapped at home. I shook my bamboo fan and responded to the enthusiastic Brian. Zombies aren't much to fear, a wall can block them. But have you considered that walls can't block malicious people with ulterior motives? In the apocalypse, laws and morals are discarded, and the unrestrained, intelligent humans are 1,000 times more terrifying than zombies. As long as everyone is united, in this world, who truly stands united with another, in her previous life, Betsy was pampered on the farm, always protected in times of danger, yet, didn't she still betray her teammates? Kaya's family always took advantage of ours, the farm supported them for 5 years, and in the bitterest cold, Brian didn't hesitate to take them in, yet, they still ended up throwing me and Brian into the snow to freeze to death. Human intentions are ever unpredictable. Brian remained spirited, and the next day he listed a dozen more plans to eradicate the zombies outside the walls. You say human nature is terrifying, but that's only when there's no food in the city. As long as there are no threats from zombies, rural areas can continue farming and breeding. Where there's hope, there will be order. In my previous life, weren't farms established to create order, yet, after a severe cold snap, internal strife on the farm led to a thorough demise, I said. Zombies lack intelligence and aren't hard to handle. We should just wait for national rescue. If you rashly organize people to fight zombies and there are casualties, how will you face their families? Brian was silent for a few days. One morning, I was awakened by the noise of his siblings. The power's back. There's a signal. May, the country has finally defeated the zombies. Mimi showed me his phone, displaying an official video of zombies being lured out of the city and then completely annihilated. The caption still read, "The people will ultimately overcome all hardships." The government also distributed oddly smelly sachets for free, which could mask human scents. A blogger specializing in fighting zombies tested it and confirmed that even in a room full of zombies, you wouldn't get bitten. I turned on my phone, fully restoring the signal. No word from Betsy, hopefully. The zombies got them. The government sent a text to everyone, urging the clearing of roads. The operation to eliminate zombies in the city was nearing completion. Food distribution could proceed normally. Zombies in rural areas would be gradually eradicated. Residents of villages and towns could travel in groups to seek refuge in the city, in front of mighty humanity. Zombies without intelligence are just mad dogs, threatening, but not a major threat, once communications were restored. A farm worker called me immediately. Sister Nan, the disaster relief people from the city said to keep your loudspeakers on as much as possible, to help eliminate the zombies in one go. I said, understood, Sister Nan, you had such foresight to build a big wall before the zombie outbreak. In my previous life, the workers were all teammates fighting zombies. I told them, my foresight tells me the crisis isn't over yet. When the government sends relief supplies, besides food, make sure you get some things for the winter. The workers agreed solemnly. They also sent a few sachets to the farm using drones. People who survived the ordeal began to show up online, encouraging each other and celebrating surviving the apocalypse. A week later, we didn't receive the government's zombie killing team. Instead, severe cold arrived, and unexpected heavy snow fell, carried by the chilling wind, drifting in, covering the earth within a day. I leaned by the door, quietly watching the snowfall. Brian leaned against his wheelchair behind me, silently watching the snow, as if draining all of Brian's strength. In just 3 days, the temperature dropped from 40 degrees above zero to 20 below. Coastal areas experienced even lower temperatures, with people freezing to death every night. With zombies still around and unexpected heavy snow, humanity truly faced the apocalypse. Despair spread among everyone. I opened a short video app, A woman in a snow-white dress stood in the snow, accusing the heavens of wanting to exterminate humanity. Behind her, skyscrapers lined up. Someone fell from a high place. The woman, startled, turned around, and then, yet another family was seen holding hands as they fell from the top floor. The video abruptly stopped. The methane was depleted. Brian, wearing a down jacket, was cooking by a fire at the doorway. Both of them expressionless, like robots busy at work. I wrapped myself in a blanket and walked over. Brian struggled to light the fire with a lighter, failing several times. Seeing me, she choked up and said, "I can't do it, Nan. I just can't light it." "It's okay," Brian cried. "If we can't start the fire, we'll freeze to death." She sobbed uncontrollably. "So many people have frozen to death, but the zombies don't. I saw online that some people are feeding the zombies, saying if you turn into one, you won't fear the cold or hunger. It's going to be okay." I hugged her. "The convenience store has an endless supply of lighters. We have sturdy walls, mountains of food. We have enough firewood to keep us warm, and a basement to shield us from the severe cold. We won't starve or freeze." Gradually, Brian stopped crying. Brian said, "I'll go and get another lighter. I'll come too. Let's move everything to the guest house while it's not too cold yet." Brian rode with me to the convenience store, asking along the way, "Are you saying it's going to get colder?" I paused. In my past life, we had died after the Double Ninth Festival, when the temperature had already dropped to around -80 degrees. The situation wasn't promising. "Let's prepare for the long haul." Brian grew more pessimistic, abruptly stopping the bike. "You said zombies aren't the scary part. People are, now that food can't regrow. Could terrorists roam around looting food? Are we safe?" I said. "I won't deny that some might commit evils in chaotic times, but the locals don't have the strength to breach the farm. Those who do have the strength wouldn't need to attack a farm. Granaries are everywhere." Reassured by my words, Brian got their spirits up. We transported all the snacks from the convenience store to the guesthouse hall. Household supplies were moved to the small storage area behind the counter. I sectioned off half of the basement first floor with a fence, laid several thick layers of film on the ground, and covered it with a thick layer of cat litter. Then I confined 15 chickens and ducks, 2 piglets, and 2 lambs there. After finishing these chores, I clapped my hands and told the 2 border collies, "From now on, you also use this as your bathroom. No peeing around." The fireplace in the hall blazed warmly, making the inside of the guesthouse feel like spring despite the exterior temperature dropping to -40 degrees. Brian had dismantled the breeding shed and barn, hauling all the wood back in a truck, piling it up like a mountain at the front door of the guesthouse. I raised a glass of grape juice and said, "See, the cold isn't so frightening." The inexhaustible charcoal fire gave them a sense of security, and May clinked her glass with mine. As the temperature continued to decline, that evening, I sat in front of the fireplace reading a book when my phone suddenly rang. It was Carl. Communications hadn't been cut off, but some areas had lost power. The farm had storage batteries, though I wondered how Carl had found a power source. The video connected, and I saw Kaya's gaunt face. "Where's Brian?" "Let Brian take the call. We barely managed to find a power source." I smiled. "We couldn't reach you for a while. Thought your whole family might have perished." Brian was upset for days. "You dead whore, you're just waiting for me to die, aren't you?" "Get Brian on the phone. Look at what you're saying. I'm not hoping for your death. Why would I hope you live?" Kaya was so angry she saw stars, and this was the first time I had shown her my malice. Casper and his son grabbed the phone and apologized to me, saying after all, we were family. I couldn't be bothered with their nonsense. "Every time you beg me, I enjoy it once more. Don't delude yourself into thinking I'll save you." I hung up the phone and blocked Carl. Now that Brian also uses my phone, I couldn't let him find out that Kaya was still alive. I leaned back in the lounge chair, pondering for a while. Then once again I tried contacting Betsy, and this time, she actually answered. "Miss Betsy, where are you now? Are you safe?" During the 4th month of the zombie outbreak, dressed in Inuit snow gear with 3 sachets on me and a canvas bag on my back, I sneaked out of the farm. In the extreme cold, the zombies moved much slower, allowing me to distract them with a piece of meat and make my way to the main road without alerting any of them. In my previous life, I learned how to make homemade bombs from a chemistry whiz who was visiting the farm. I reached the farthest ambush point visible from the farm and stopped there, checking the thermometer I carried. It was -58 degrees, the old saying goes, on a moonless, windy night, perfect for murder. Here I was, planting bombs in the snowy cold night. This dreadful weather, with its ghosts and blizzards, made it especially easy to be mischievous without fear of being discovered. After setting the bombs, I unwrapped the fresh meat from my bag and tossed it by the roadside. The next morning, I sat in the sunroom on the 4th floor, observing the road through binoculars amidst heavy snow and fog, seeing nothing but a white blur. I couldn't see Betsy's convoy. Last night, Betsy mentioned that 10 days ago, Daniel suddenly went mad, killed his teammates, and then tried to kill her. Fortunately, the bodyguards her parents had sent arrived just in time, and she only injured an arm. Curiously, it was another case where all teammates died except Betsy. Also, why did Daniel want to wipe out his own team? I asked with concern. Are you all right? It's fine, except that Daniel burned down the granary. Miss Betsy, how have you managed these last 10 days? After a pause, I heard her voice, tinged with a laugh. I bought some food from the villagers. Bought, in these times, where grain is as precious as flesh and water as blood. What did she use to buy? I sighed, my tone full of concern for Betsy. Miss Betsy, you can't keep buying supplies temporarily on your way back to your parents'. My place is over 100 kilometers from Daniel's farm. Why don't you detour here? Load up some food for the road. Betsy agreed. The snowy weather made travel slow, but she was sure to reach the southern farm today. Thinking about this made my hands tremble with excitement. Brian urged me to come down for dinner, but I didn't move. He had no choice but to light a small charcoal brazier for me. He also heated my meal and brought it up before I sent him away and locked the door of the sunroom. The charcoal in the brazier burned brightly, and I finally spotted Betsy's convoy appearing. 3 reinforced Russian Brolic Polar all-terrain motorhomes entered my field of view one by one, closer and closer. As all 3 vehicles entered the blast zone, I detonated the bombs without hesitation. The violent explosion, mingled with the scent of blood, stirred the zombies wandering outside the farm into a frenzy. They shrieked and rushed towards the site of the incident. I observed the explosion site through my binoculars, unsure if my homemade bomb was too weak or if the modified polar vehicles had too high defense. The expected scene of destruction and death did not occur. Only 2 of the 3 vehicles flipped over. The middle one remained unscathed. However, the zombies were there to help. Attracted by the raw meat the night before, dozens of zombies swarmed the area, blocking those trying to escape from the vehicles. Fully armed bodyguards crawled out of the overturned vehicles, shooting at the zombies while protecting the intact vehicle, regardless of their own injuries. Betsy was in that vehicle, lowering the window and skillfully shooting at the zombies. She had short blue hair, wore over-the-ear headphones, and chewed gum. It seemed she was moving her body to the rhythm of the music, and whenever she hit a zombie, she'd give herself a celebratory fist pump. Enjoy it while you can, because the fun won't last long. The horde of zombies at the perimeter of the farm had been lured over. The scent packets they carried could only mask human scents, not the smell of human blood. Once zombies pick up the scent of blood, they pursue relentlessly. No matter how many bullets they had, they couldn't withstand the sheer number of zombies. Betsy, this is the grand gift I've prepared for you for 4 months. You like fighting zombies? Right, have a blast. Knocking sounds emerged, and Brian timidly asked, we heard an explosion. What happened outside? The only place in the guest house with a view of the incident was the sunroom, I said. There was a car accident on the main road, and it attracted all the zombies. It's pretty scary. You're better off not looking. Brian obediently walked away. Brian then asked, could anyone in the car still be alive? Are they savable? I glanced at the swarm of zombies pouncing towards the polar vehicle and said, no one will survive this. At the same time, I threw the bomb detonator into the fire. I walked to the window, intently watching the car, determined to see Betsy die with my own eyes. A storm blew through, and along with the dense fog, the zombie horde surged towards Betsy's car. The gunfire weakened, the living were devoured by zombies. A scene all too familiar from my past life. I watched for a long time, until the fog thickened and my limbs felt stiff, then slowly made my way downstairs. Finally, my revenge was complete. The temperature kept dropping, reaching -65 degrees at night. We moved into the basement for shelter. The furnaces on the first and second basement levels burned day and night, and combined with the insulated walls, kept the basement temperature around -10 degrees. It was still cold, but manageable with thick clothing. We cooked on the first basement level and used leftover food to feed the small animals. I partitioned 2 small rooms on the second basement floor. The mattresses and blankets were super insulating, making the bed very warm and causing all 3 of us to develop a habit of lingering in bed. As for using the restroom, we used simple toilets lined with plastic bags filled with cat litter, which we disposed of during the day. 3 days after blowing up Betsy's convoy, I went back to the sunroom with a telescope to survey the area. The snow had now covered the blood, with only zombies wandering about. Brian followed, took the telescope for a while, and sighed. That's tragic. A lot of people died, didn't they? I snatched the telescope back. I told you not to look. You'll have nightmares again, Brian said. The gunfire lasted a long time that day. Those people had guns. What are you suggesting? I want to retrieve their guns. That way, we'll also have weapons to protect ourselves. The most dangerous thing around here is the zombies. We should just stay safe at home. Why take the risk? I turned and went downstairs, but Brian persisted. There are already armed strangers coming here. This time they were unlucky and got attacked by zombies. What if next time they come to rob the farm? I was at a loss for words, unable to tell him that I had deliberately lured those people here for an ambush. Back in the basement, I took off my thick gloves and down jacket. And Brian secured the candle before speaking again. We can't hesitate any longer. In a few days, the snow will be too thick, and we won't be able to cover it up. I remained silent, and Brian continued, Xiaonan, these past few days every time I close my eyes, I hear the gunfire from 3 days ago. I'm really scared that one day, that gunfire will erupt in our farm. I've been paralyzed for so many years. You've been the backbone of both our home and the world outside. Now that I'm better, let me take a risk for once and do something for our family. I rubbed my forehead and gave a wry smile. All right, I'll join you on this great adventure. I quickly devised a plan of action while Mimi used a telescope from the terrace to watch the zombies. In extremely low temperatures, the phone can only stay on for about half an hour. That means we have only half an hour to act safely. Both of us understood. Brian and I dressed up in Inuit attire, wore sachets, and armed ourselves before heading out. The wind was strong, and it took us about 2 hours to reach our hideout. Brian signaled to Mimi, and soon after, the sound of fireworks crackled from the direction of the farm. The wandering zombies were immediately drawn to the noise. We hid carefully as the zombies rushed past us towards the farm. It wasn't until Mimi called that we sprang to our feet and ran towards the polar vehicle. At the moment we answered the call, Mimi said, the zombies are 500 meters from the farm. Remember, set off fireworks every 5 minutes. Brian and I first checked 3 vehicles. They were all empty. We exchanged glances and immediately split up to take action. I dug around the ground with a shovel for weapons while he checked the polar vehicles, confirming they were operable but blocked by other overturned vehicles. I threw the guns on the vehicle and said, we'll use these weapons to blast the vehicle blocking our path and charge through. The firearms were heavy. Without a vehicle, we wouldn't be able to take much back with us. We gathered a dozen machine guns and several pistols. I also found a pink pistol that belonged to Betsy, though its magazine was empty. Brian mentioned that the other 2 vehicles would definitely have magazines. They hadn't had time to reload during the zombie attack. He searched one of the previous vehicles while I went into the other, collecting useful barrels of fuel and weapons. Suddenly, Mimi yelled through the phone, it's bad. The zombies are turning back. You guys need to hurry. Why would the zombies turn back? There was no time to ponder. I told Mimi to set off the fireworks and shouted to Brian to hurry. I jumped into the driver's seat and started the vehicle. With the machine gun loaded, I aimed at the fuel tank of the vehicle ahead, ready to blow it up as soon as Brian got on. Mimi's urgent voice rang out again. The fireworks aren't working. The zombies are speeding up towards you. Hurry. At the same time, Brian emerged from the overturned vehicle, covered in blood, especially around his feet. He rushed into the back vehicle carrying some magazines. I fired at the fuel tank ahead, and the explosion was loud, attracting the zombies even faster. Mimi's voice came through again. All the zombies are running back. Hurry. The phone suddenly shut off, cutting off Mimi's words. We saw the horde of zombies encircling us, Brian said. Is it the blood on me that's drawing the zombies back? I couldn't see Brian, only felt his presence was very subdued. I said, it's okay, this vehicle is sturdy, just sit tight, I'll drive us through. Taking advantage of the zombies not yet fully gathered, I floored the accelerator and charged through the zombie crowd, heading towards the farm. Several zombies roared and clung to the vehicle, not only impossible to shake off, but, Brian said, Xiaonan, we can't bring so many zombies into the farm. The farm will be overrun. I forced myself to stay calm and reassured Brian. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Brian reached up from behind and placed 3 sachets close to my body, saying, the zombies are attracted to the scent of blood on me, as long as I get out of the car. You and Mimi will be safe. No, we can't do that, I protested, tears streaming down my face. Just throw away your shoes. Breathing heavily, Brian confessed, Xiaonan, I've been bitten. Underneath the car, a zombie's head had penetrated Brian's shoe. I cried uncontrollably. I know, the blood had frozen on the car. It couldn't have rubbed off on Brian. It must have been during his struggle with the zombie head that he accidentally got covered in blood when Brian got into the car. I noticed his staggering steps. He didn't sit in the passenger seat but moved to the back, and I suspected something was wrong with him. Trying to keep the car steady, I cried out, Brian, quickly throw your shoes out. Brian forced a smile. In this weather, if I take off my shoes, my feet will freeze. Driving the car, I sobbed heavily. Your life is more important, Xiaonan. We both know there's no surviving this virus. Even if you turn into a zombie, you're still my husband. I'll take you home, and someday, there will be a cure. But Brian said, I don't want to be a burden to you anymore. His voice was hoarse. Wife, I don't want to be your burden. I heard him shifting his body and immediately screamed, no, Brian, don't. Just because others turn into zombies when bitten doesn't mean you will. You have antibodies. Yes, you have antibodies. You'll be fine. The polar vehicle moved slowly, and zombies surged like a tidal wave outside the window, Brian said. If there really were antibodies, the government would have announced it, right? Don't, Brian, don't. I drove on, tears streaming down my face. Go home, don't stop the car. After saying his last words, Brian suddenly opened the door and hurled himself into the zombie horde like a bullet. Brian, no, I screamed my heart out, watching through the rearview mirror as the zombies, attracted by Brian's blood, abandoned the snowmobile and swarmed him like ants to sugar. The vehicle suddenly felt lighter, and I cried so hard I dared not slow down to take another look at Brian. Turning into the farm's driveway, the wave-like horde of zombies seemed to vanish in an instant, and so did Brian. I had lost him forever. Mimi opened the farm's gate for me, and I drove the polar vehicle inside before she quickly closed the gate. I stumbled out of the car, and Mimi, crying uncontrollably, clung to me. Did the zombies eat Big Brother? Unable to comfort Mimi, I returned to the basement in a daze and threw myself onto the bed, Brian's familiar scent enveloping me as I buried my head in the pillow. I wept uncontrollably. Why did I ever agree to his adventurous plans? If we had just stayed safely at home, right now, Brian would have been cooking dinner for me. He would have been upstairs, making dinner, after lying down for days. By the time I gathered enough strength to make it to the 4th floor, the traces outside were already buried under the snow. I stared at the spot where Brian jumped from the car, my tears flowing freely. Suddenly, the phone rang. I answered it, and to my surprise, it was Kaya's voice. My dear niece-in-law, how are you and Brian doing? Put him on the phone, will you? My voice was hoarse. What do you want? Through the phone, Casper and Carl said, we found some kind folks who are taking us back to our hometown. We're nearly at the farm. Come pick us up. They said they'll drop us at the farm's crossroads in half an hour as they need to continue their journey. We're family, after all. You wouldn't let us freeze to death out here, would you? I remained silent. Kaya continued, I'm telling you, even if we freeze, we'll freeze at the farm's gates. If you dare not come, see if Brian agrees. Fine, I'll come get you. I drove the snowmobile out, instructing Little Bo before I left, guard the gate. If anyone other than me comes, shoot them. Don't let a single person into the farm. Halfway down the farm's path, I saw Kaya and her sons, heavily clad, struggling through the snow. They were determined that once they reached the farm, Brian wouldn't ignore them. Unfortunately, Brian was no longer with us. I turned the snowmobile around and waited for them. As Kaya's family caught up, Casper cursed, you heartless creature, why couldn't you drive the snowmobile a bit forward? Why make us suffer more in the cold? Kaya tightened her scarf. Stop that now. Just get on. I pulled out a pistol and suddenly shot Casper in the leg. Casper screamed and fell, with Kaya and Carl rushing to help him. Kaya yelled, you monster, he's your uncle. Are you trying to kill someone? I am indeed here to kill. I turned and grabbed a shovel from the vehicle, planting it firmly in the ground. Casper, what really happened in Brian's car accident 8 years ago? Casper, clutching his injured leg, replied, what does that have to do with me? Still denying it, I shot his other leg. Casper wailed in pain. I planned to drive you away after Brian's death, but I swear the accident had nothing to do with me. I put away the gun, emotionlessly stating, whether you admit it or not, it doesn't change the fact that I'm here to kill today. Kaya, eyes red with fury, pointed at me and charged, you beast, if you have the guts, kill me. I don't believe Brian would let you slander us like this. Brian and Bo are my blood. If you kill me, I don't believe they won't avenge me. I picked up the shovel and swung hard, severing Kaya's hand, which instantly froze upon hitting the snowy ground. Kaya, in agony, knelt down. Zombies, attracted by the blood, began howling and charging towards us. I said, knowing you're Brian's kin, I won't use his gun to kill you. With a forceful thrust, I sliced through Kaya's throat, blood splattering everywhere. Carl dropped his parents and ran. I tossed the shovel, catching it midair, and hurled it, hitting Carl in the back. As Carl fell into the snow and turned around, I was already in front of him. Where's your girlfriend? In my previous life, it was Carl and his girlfriend who left me in the snow. Carl, unable to lie, trembled. My dad killed her 3 months ago. We ate her, waiting for government aid. It's a relief she's dead. Now I don't need to seek revenge. As the zombies closed in, I slashed Carl's face with a shovel and snatched the sachet from his body, then quickly turned to leave. Miss May, Carl knelt and cried out, Miss May, I know you are not a cruel person. It was my family who wronged you. Please, grant my son and me a swift end. That won't do. I kept walking. You'll need to turn into zombies. That way, dead encircling my farm, you'll be of use to me as guards. Only then does your death have value. You should experience the pain I felt in my past life from a zombie bite. I started the snowmobile and saw through the rearview mirror that the 3 were being bitten by zombies. The father and son cursed me with their dying breaths, wishing me a terrible death. I felt nothing inside. Brian was dead. Why should these evil men live? If heaven won't take them, I'll do it myself. After the double ninth festival, the snow suddenly grew heavier. In just a few days, it had buried the first floor of our guest house and the temperature dropped to minus 98 degrees. Little Boo and I completely stopped going above ground. Fortunately, the temperature didn't drop further, giving us new hope. Things will get better, won't they, Brian?